Chapter 18. Flashback. The fight was over almost as quickly as it started, but it wasn't like the others. This one was brutal. He had a lot of hopes for Tsume's fight against Fugaku, but Fugaku seemed to have taken things to a whole new level once he switched his Sharingan on. He was relentless. Almost as if he wanted to bring pain to his teammate. There was obvious tension within the team. Tch, Tsume scoffed, struggling to get on her feet. That the best you got, Uchiha? Fugaku smirked. I'm just getting started. He looked over at Kuramaru, who had been injured during the fight, struggling to bring himself towards his master. Nothing life-threatening from the looks of it, but he definitely couldn't fight for the rest of the match or day, most likely. He quickly made a hand sign as he held his index and ring finger to his mouth. Fire-style fireball jutsu. Using the two fingers as something of a barrier to control the flow of fire, he shot the fireball into the direction of Tsume, approaching fast. Kayasato lost it. He hadn't realized his instincts taking over as he bolted off of the balcony into the arena. A half-second later he was in front of Tsume and quickly timed his palm, deflecting the fireball off into an aerial direction out of the stadium. Fugaku was completely taken off guard. He didn't think anyone would jump in to help her, much less deflect one of his strongest jutsus with just the flick of a hand. You bastard, Kayasato snarled at him. Your own teammate? Are you that cold-hearted you would torment not only a friend but your own teammate? Fugaku smirked. She wanted me to get serious, so I did, he smugly replied. You expect me to be blamed for fighting seriously? You were going to kill her, you prick. He shouted back. All right, that's enough. Jiraiya said, finally stepping in. Fugaku, you've clearly won. There was no need for that. Whatever. He simply walked off, following the hearing cheers of audience and applause, catching on to his victory. Kayasato turned around to see an angry Tsume looking back up at him. When he offered his hand, she ignored it, standing up herself. Why the hell did you do that? She demanded as she finally rose to her feet. What? Tsume didn't even let him finish as she walked over to Kuramaru, who was being picked up onto a stretcher. She stroked him before letting him be taken away to recover. She purposely ignored Kayasato's stare at her as she walked past him towards the stairs back to the waiting room. You can stay here since your match is. Jiraiya stopped talking as he watched Kayasato take off after her. Kids, he thought. Scene change. Tsume, hold on. She turned around with her arms crossed, still embarrassed by her rescue from just a few minutes ago. Look, I'm not thanking you. You don't have to. I wanted to do that. What? Look, I don't even know who the hell you are, but don't do that again. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that was, being rescued like that? Who do you think you are? He looked at the ground. I don't know, I'm sorry. He whispered. It wasn't until the last second he saw her sandals on the ground next to his. He attempted to look up but had his face caught by her hands as they went past his face, around his neck, as she leaned up and placed her lips onto his. He was definitely not expecting that. His eyes were wide open. She was just yelling at him and belittling him down. Now she was kissing him? Worked for him. He happily smiled as he closed his eyes, returning the kiss as he wrapped his arms around her hips. It was a nice surprise. He could hear Jiraiya calling for the participants of the next match to enter, but he ignored it. This was too great. She finally let him go before giving him a light kiss once more, both of them keeping each other in their arms. It was nice to see a smile on her face after she was just yelling at him for saving her. You should go. Your match is going to start. He grumbled as he looked outside, watching Jiraiya staring at him with his arms crossed. Sheesh, does he always watch? She smiled. Go. I'll be here when you get back. She kissed him one more time before letting go, heading back upstairs to the waiting room. Getting serious again, he made his way out to find Shikaku standing there with an impatient and bored expression across his face. He didn't look like he'd be much of a challenge, but he's learned a lot from today about not taking things at face value. Shikaku, Kayasato, are you two ready? Yeah, said Kayasato. I guess, said Shikaku. Begin. Kayasato didn't waste any time as he immediately went for the first punch. Shikaku easily caught his punch, yawning immediately afterwards. What? You call that a punch? This fight is gonna be such a drag. His temper flared as he pulled his fist back and went down to attempt a trip only to find Shikaku gone. What the? Where did he go? Arf. He turned around but wasn't fast enough. Shikaku slammed an open palm into his temple and sent Kayasato flying several feet before he regained his footing. This guy, he's no pushover. He acts like he's about to fall asleep, but he's quicker and stronger than most of the ninjas I know. And he knows what I'm going to do. I can't even track his scent fast enough to react in time. He just stood there with his arms crossed waiting for the next move. He wasn't arrogant, confident, he wasn't anything. He was just bored. I need to calm down. This guy's obviously thinking of something. If I remember correctly, the Nara clan is known for thinking several steps ahead, so I need to really do something out of character. If I can throw him off, I think I have a shot. I can tell how much that ripped at you in the earlier fight with Tsume and Fugaku, right? He tried to turn around, but he couldn't. He was stuck. He glanced down and saw his shadow was connected to his, and Shikaku was already behind him. How is he that much faster than me? This is unreal. Truth be told, if I saw something like that happen to a girl I cared about, I'd definitely want to give them a piece of my mind. Kayasato turned his head in an attempt to make eye contact. Yeah. Nothing's easy watching it on the sideline. He nodded. If it helps any at all, I'm already almost out of chakra. His eyes opened with shock. What? How? You're beating me senselessly. I was supposed to fight Hayashi first round. You know how I aimed for your temple? That would have put him in the hospital for a week. Hyugas have a high sensitivity in the areas of their eyes. Add that into the fact the temple is already sensitive to humans, and you can imagine how much of a weak spot it is for them. My fighting style isn't suited for you. In a few more seconds I'll be out of chakra. That first punch had most of my chakra, the rest of it was going towards my speed to try and outmaneuver his Byakugan. Just as he finished, the shadow was released and Kayasato turned to face Shikaku, still carrying his same expression. You're seriously? He shrugged his shoulders. It's a real drag, I know. I had the next 381 moves planned out too had I not run out of chakra so soon. I just wanted to use the last of it to let you know you'll win in the end. And that Uchiha guy is a bit of a douche. Be sure to take him out. I'm sure your lady friend will appreciate it. Kayasato smiled at the new friend he made. They shook hands as Shikaku informed Jiraiya he would be unable to fight any longer, announcing the Inuzuka the winner. Good luck against him. I know this is personal for you, Shikaku said, making his way to the exit with his hands in his pockets. Arf. Hey, we got lucky, boy. I know we're good, but if he had more chakra we probably wouldn't have gotten off so easily. Shikaku Nara, he really won this match. That guy is without a doubt a genius. As he finally made it back up to the waiting room, he saw Shibi and Minato staring at each other from opposite ends of the room. They've been doing that since the end of Minato's match, Tsume said, patting a spot down next to her where she was sitting on the ground. Kayasato took a seat next to her. What do you think will happen? I don't know. Minato is probably one of the best ninja to come out of the village at his age so far. The boy is gifted and without a doubt could become Hokage if that's what he really wanted to. But the Aburame is nothing short of talented. It will be an interesting fight. Shibi and Minato didn't even blink as their mental battle continued. For Shibi it seemed easier to hide behind his glasses, but he wasn't blinking at all. Since the rumors of his space-time jutsu were since proven against Choza, he knew he had to make this battle as close-quartered as he could make it. Despite it not being his specialty, he had trained it just as efficiently as his other skills for just such an occasion such as this. Will Minato Namikaze and Shibi Aburame please report to the arena for the first semi-finals match? They still kept their stare at each other. Looks like it's our turn, Shibi finally said. So it seems, Minato replied. Just like that, they were gone and already standing by Jiraiya, surprisingly not surprised by their speed. Kayasato didn't even remember Shibi being that fast ever. Are you two ready? Silence. I see, Jiraiya said. In that case, you may begin. Nothing had changed from when they were in the waiting area. Simply analyzing the opponent in front of them, processing, networking hundreds of moves and possibilities, and as they finally each took 2 steps back, they vanished. Where did they go? Kayasato asked out loud as he watched from the waiting area. Their scents would pop in and out all over the place. He could barely keep any sort of trace on them, and he couldn't even see them. Were they really moving that fast? On the battle floor, Jiraiya was impressed with how well the Aburame could compete with his apprentice. Neither had an advantage, just even speed and apparently even skill in taijutsu, which was another thing that had surprised him about the bug user. After several minutes of seeing nothing, the 2 ninjas finally appeared several feet in the air at a standstill between kunai. They managed to push each other back as they each respectively flipped back to an opposite side of the ring. Then, just as the excitement had begun, they were still again. Kunai's drawn stances taken, but no movement. Almost as if someone simultaneously hit the off button for both of them after such an intense session they had. Then at a sudden moment they sped to each other, cross paths, as a hard clashing of blades was made apparent to everyone. Yet to everyone's surprise, both of the combatants fell over at the same time. Jiraiya simply smirked, acknowledging how Shibi was able to time himself just right with his student as both of the bodies disappeared. Minato's turning into a simple cloud of smoke, while Shibi's disappeared into a large collection of bugs as the real ninjas were quickly slashing away kunai against kunai. Shibi was mostly on the defensive but would always find a way to counter Minato, who always had to stay aggressive. Minato made a lower cut to his abdomen, but Shibi jumped back onto the wall. They were close to lunging himself towards Minato as they both disappeared again. Neither Inuzukas could follow them by sight. They could only hear the clashing of blades and occasionally catch one of them trying to slash the other, but would dodge and resume their intense session of speed and attempted precision. At last the final boom was heard from everyone in the stadium. The clap of thunder was followed by the falling of both shinobi once again, except this time it was very real, with Minato barely catching himself at the last minute, where Shibi landed on his back exhausted from the grueling match against the future Hokage. Jiraiya quickly examined Shibi to make sure he was okay. Once he confirmed he was just simply exhausted and suffered a few broken bones, he announced Minato as the winner. "Wait," Shibi said. "I want to say something to him." Minato heard him and walked over to where Shibi was being lifted onto a stretcher. "You were a very worthy opponent. No doubt in my mind you will continue to move up in the ranks with your skills. I've never been so pushed to my limits as I had now." "Thank you." Minato smiled. "You certainly weren't easy. You definitely showed me how strong the Aburame clan is." The smile on Shibi's face was hard to read due to his chin cover of his jacket, but the change in his cheeks showed that he was. "Someday, Minato, I want a rematch." Afterwards he was carried away by the medical corps. With a slight limp, Minato made his way back to the waiting area up the stairs and sat down next to the railings in order for him to watch the next fight. "He's on your team?" he asked Kayasato. He turned, forgetting he was sitting so close to him while he was standing. "Yes. He's good. Very good." He nodded. "Thank you." He looked back down to see Fugaku with his arms crossed, impatiently waiting as he stared up into the waiting area. Tsume looked over at him. "Good luck." He nodded, keeping his focus on the Uchiha. "Come on to Mamoru." End flashback. "No way," Kiba said. "Shino's dad really put up that much of a fight against the 4th Hokage?" His father laughed. "He wasn't the 4th yet, but it was a very interesting fight." "So I'm wondering something," Kiba pondered. "All of these people, they're all parents, aren't they? Well, don't they all become some eventually?" He nodded. "That's right. Fugaku went on to become the head of the Uchiha clan. Before I died him and I came to an understanding between each other. We weren't exactly friends, mind you, but we did get along. He had a newborn son a few years before I died. He named him Itachi, I believe. It was around the same time Hana was born that I found out." "What?" Kiba shouted. "That means my dad fought against Sasuke's? Something wrong, son?" Fugaku, he had another son. Named Sasuke. He's a missing nin in the village now. I see, his father replied. And Itachi? He defected after he slaughtered the entire Uchiha clan. His father's face remained the same as he gazed further into the horizon. I see, it's a shame. Fugaku was a remarkable ninja. Very talented, very sure his son Itachi would succeed him. It is tragic such a fate befell him. So how did the rest of the tournament turn out? He asked, breaking the silence. Oh. Heh. Well, it's quite funny you mention that. I can't seem to remember the rest of the tournament after that fight. I remember fighting Minato, so I know I beat Fugaku, but I don't remember how the rest of it turned out. Kiba frowned. He was looking forward to hearing another story. Bummer. So what happened to you, Dad? Do you remember how you died? His father frowned but nodded. Yes. That's not something I could ever forget. And all the events leading up to it. What happened? It was right after your sister was born. I, along with Shibi and Hayashi, were all jonin at this point, yet we still were a team with Tsukumo Hataki. This mission in particular was of great importance to the village and failure was not an option. You died during the mission? No. Not completely. What do you mean? We were sent to investigate the strange disappearances of ninjas from different areas in the Land of Fire and even the Land of Wind. The first few disappearances were merely looked upon as simple missing person reports until we realized several of these people were high-ranking ninja. One of which was the third Kazekage. An S-rank mission. Absolutely top secret from both the Fire and Wind daimyo. What happened, Dad? Son, what we saw no pair of eyes should have ever seen. Chapter 19, Flashback, pack light but effective. That's what his sensei taught him when going on long missions. A light sleeping bag, a few flasks of water and a box of 12 ration bars. Hopefully that was enough. Just follow the lead the Hokage gave them, grab the Kazekage and be home. Easy enough. It was early. Glancing up at the time, he saw it reading 1 a.m. Were you going to at least tell me you were leaving? Kayasato turned quickly to see his wife and mate Tsume standing in the doorway of their bedroom from the outside in the hallway, holding a sleeping infant Hana in her arms. She had woken up to change her and put her back to sleep. Her eyes heavily tinted from the lack of sleep as she looked at him. I'm sorry, Tsume. It's classified, I know. I've been there, she said, approaching him. She finally stopped in front of him, cradling Hana in her arms in happiness that she had stopped crying. I still think she looks more like you, he said, admiring her. Her birthmarks had already manifested onto her shortly after she was 6 months old. Maybe. She definitely has your straight hair. You'd be able to tell right away if she had mine. I'll be back as soon as we're done, I promise, he said, taking her face in between his hands. She didn't say anything, just sighed. The third was kind enough to give some sort of back pay to her so she could help raise the baby, but it was merely half of what she usually made from a mission. The only real source of income came from Kayasato's missions, and with him always going out to support her and Hana, it felt like the family rarely saw each other. This is just hard, Kyo, she said. This is the first S rank you've done. What if something? He silenced her concern by kissing her. Her tired form didn't even bother to fight it as she kissed him back. Nothing will happen. I promise. Don't promise, she kissed him again. Just come home to your family. He nodded before taking his pack and swinging it behind him. He made his way to the door with his faithful friend who was waiting for him at the bottom of the stairs and looked back. She was sad he was leaving, but she kept her smile for support. She knew he'd come back. And with that he closed the door behind him and made his way to the gate to meet with the rest of the team. Scene change, he was the last one there. Even as Jonin, Hayashi and Shibi still liked wearing clothes most resembling to their clan. Kayasato felt out of place being the only one in the standard Jonin attire. He checked to make sure his hair was out of his way, readying the back in its long ponytail as it slapped the middle of his shoulders on his back. Arf. Yeah, I am. It's my first S-rank mission, I'm allowed to be nervous, right, boy? The now large and full-sized German shepherd gave a small whine as they approached the Hyuga and Aburame. "Where's Tsukumo-sensei?" Kayasato asked. "No idea," Shibi replied. In that moment Tsukumo appeared before them in a puff of smoke. "I'm sorry for being late. Are you all ready?" he asked, to which all three nodded. "I don't need to remind you there is a very good chance this mission could take us some time. Have you made a mention of this to your loved ones?" All three nodded again, to Mamoru giving a quick bark. "There's a very good reason why we've been selected to do this mission, and I don't think I have to remind you, but there's more going on than just simple kidnappings." The third Kazekage, Hayashi, spoke up. "This seems to be more of a political situation, not just a civil dispute." Tsukumo nodded. "That's right. Because we've offered full cooperation with the search, the Sand has agreed to not act on hostilely to us. We're in a bad light right now, and the success of this mission, well, let's just say it's a one-option deal. We don't get to fail." "Do we have any sort of lead, sensei?" Shibi asked. Despite their ranks all attaining the same title and equal power, the three newer Jonin were still taught by the man leading the team and never stopped calling him sensei even when he had asked them to. "Very little," Tsukumo said, taking point, walking out of the village with the other four closely behind him. "Our first objective is to go speak with the fourth Kazekage. We'll be leaving for the village hidden in the sand now. If we hurry, we might save half a day's travel time." In agreement, all five made haste for the sand, wasting no time knowing that it would take time. Scene change. Traveling through the desert was much easier for this team than they had expected. Sandstorms that would typically lead to most travelers' demise were a simple fix with Hayashi's Byakuken. Finally approaching the main gates, they were greeted by two Sand Jonin fully suited in the standard issue gear. "Tsukumo Hataki? The white fan of the leaf?" asked one of the ninja. "Yes." He nodded. "We're here about the missing persons report." "Of course. Please, this way. The fourth Kazekage is expecting you." The team willingly followed the two escorts into the village, which was eerily quiet. Hayashi had activated his Byakugan only to find all of the citizens locked in their homes. These people, are they that afraid that they would not even stop outside their own home? He thought to himself. You understand that due to the circumstances of this situation that the majority of the citizens, aside from most ninja, have been asked to remain in their homes. This is a very delicate matter, and we've had to keep a tight watch on security since the disappearances, especially after the third Kazekage," said one of the escorts. Finally coming to the office of the Kazekage, the escorts knocked before hearing a faint command for them to enter. "Lord Kazekage, the team from the Leaf are here to see you. Send them in." The two ninja motioned for them to enter, exiting the door and shutting it behind them after they had all entered. "I won't waste your time, but thank you for coming on such short notice. As you know, the disappearances, particularly the third Kazekage's, has shaken morale extensively. I'm also sure you're aware how your village is held in high suspicion to this." Tsukumo in front nodded. "We're willing to do everything we can to help prove the accusation was falsely placed." "Good. Now then, our only lead has been placed with a missing nin from this village. We suspect his involvement in this kidnapping, along with several others, were very strangely timed to the same time he had defected from the village." Of course, Tsukumo nodded. "Do you have anything we could go off of? Evidence, a blood sample, hair even? We have a suspected hideout that one of our Umbu units found during one of the search parties. I can't spare any ninja due to the Wind Daimyo's severe budget cuts to the village. The third Hokage assured me this team is the best one for the job." All four ninjas nodded in acknowledgement. The Kazekage opened a drawer from his desk, handing Tsukumo a manila folder with several pictures inside. The senior Hataki opened the folder, flipping through the pictures quickly but still getting a good look at them. Something about them all gave him a bad feeling about all of this. "These pictures, they're all from, as you can clearly see, they are not very far away from us. Umbu has reported the hideout roughly a few miles to the southwest, somewhere within the rocky outcrop. Most likely the entrance is concealed by a jinjutsu, but I'm sure with the Hyuga and your level of rank it should be easy enough to get in. What I don't understand is why they would let themselves be exposed so easily, Kayasato thought out loud. I mean, if their hideout is only a few miles away, is it really their hideout and not some sort of trap? It seems too obvious. Maybe not, Shibi replied. It's a possibility that they know it's so exposed and have it heavily fortified. It could also tunnel to several other locations, in which case that one area is simply a channel for many. Hayashi nodded. Either way, we need to check it out for ourselves. Lord Kazakage, is there anything else you can tell us about the situation? That's about it, I'm afraid. I've cleared with the board for your stay here. Any hotel in the village is yours to stay in completely free of charge as a token of our appreciation. Thank you, Tsume said. But we made a commitment to bring the third Kazakage back and investigate these other disappearances. We'll only take a small break before leaving right away. I assure you we will get to the bottom of this. End flashback. The search didn't take very long. However, the outcome of our discovery is what labeled this mission its well-deserved ranking. Was the third Kazakage dead? He shook his head. It wasn't that. It was everything else. The sight of dead bodies, as strange as it seems to be, you somehow get used to it. But this wasn't just dead bodies. Flashback. Finding the hideout really was as easy as they thought it would be. A 5.5-mile walk southwest landed them in a rocky outcrop with a conveniently placed center boulder in the center of it. From an aerial view, it would appear to have a resemblance to a bullseye target, with the center rock being the bullseye. Save your chakra, Hayashi Tsume said, standing in front of the rock after touching it to make sure they were right in front of the seal. Release. And with a quick hand sign, the front of the rock disappeared, giving a staircase going straight down in a spiral towards a complete shroud of darkness. Tomomaru scratched his master's leg. He really didn't like the smell coming down, and he could tell his master couldn't either. I smell it too, boy, Kayasato said, looking at Tsume with his back still to them. Sensei, whatever is down there, I know, he said, turning to face the rest of the team. Listen, whatever is down there is nothing friendly. If the third Kazakage is down there, we have to be on our guard in case they hold him for ransom. Whatever happens, you three, we cannot fail this mission. Its success is crucial to tipping the balance between the hidden leaf and sand in terms of hostility. Right. All three responded in union. Tsume nodded back to them. I've trained you three since you were mere boys. Now we are all jonin. I have come to recognize each and every one of your abilities. You are some of the finest ninja I have ever trained, and I couldn't ask for better teammates. He looked back towards the inviting staircase. Let's go. Scene change. Their descent was dead quiet. Before entering, each ninja and dog coated their feet with a web of chakra to decrease the noise the foot would make when it comes down. The short search felt like it was taking hours, as their quiet expedition was brought to a halt by the sounds of screaming and disgusted gurgles of pain. Sin Kayasato tried to speak up but was hushed by Shibi before he could say more and risk exposing them. He said nothing to him as he simply shook his head and continued on. Hayashi was taking point. With his Byakugan, he was able to see exactly what was in front of them and helped keep the entire team out of traps, which to everyone's surprise there were none to be encountered yet. Tsume was behind, keeping a strong middle in between them, with Kayasato behind him and Shibi guarding the rear, leaving several beetles behind him to pick up the scents of anyone who may be following them. It was a solid setup. Tsume then stopped Hayashi as he came to a stop himself, bringing all four of them together. All right. This is it. Whatever happens, keep it tight and quiet. The three young jonin nodded before hearing a small tapping on the ceiling. Hayashi looked up with his Byakugan, but his Kekkei Genkai did him no good, as everyone could see the gas being released from the ventilation that was hidden inside the stone ceiling as they all coughed and gasped for air, only to eventually succumb to the fumes and pass out. Scene change. The cold damp air made its way through the cracks in the rocky foundation, waking the young white Fong. He rose to his feet and glanced around but found he was in complete darkness. He concentrated for a moment to find his four companions behind him, though it seemed they were still unconscious. Something about the chamber they were in, it felt wrong. Death was at every corner of this room. He didn't know who was keeping them captive, but he had to find a way free. He tried to step but was stuck. Something was holding his feet together, yet his arms were free. You're awake? Good. His focus went dead ahead as he tried to make out the figure in front of him about 30 feet away. A slender man stood there. Who are you? What is this? The figure chuckled to himself as the room suddenly shimmered with light. The entire room was disgusting, disturbing, and something only one could see in a nightmare. The walls, the ceilings, all but the floor were all covered by the bodies of hundreds of people sealed against the wall and the top of the room. But something was even odder about them. They seemed glazed. Almost as if they weren't humans but puppets. He looked around horrified as every single person's face was plastered with a look of fear and grimace, their eyes wide with terror and pain. It was logical to assume these people were left as they were when they were converted or killed. He couldn't tell what was happening. All he could hope for was that this was just some awful type of genjutsu he could break away from. He glanced down at his feet to see a small blue line wrapped around them, with each string branching into 3 smaller ones heading behind him. As he turned his head, he saw each of his students tied to an open casket of an Iron Maiden. The casket was wide open and each person was tied individually to the case, threads made of absolutely pure chakra. The opening of the casket was tied in with a thread of chakra as well, and as he put 2 and 2 together, he realized his movement or lack thereof was keeping those caskets opened. The oddest thing about all of it was the person in front of him. He was a young man, maybe 15 years of age at most. His eyes seemed heavy, almost as if he was ready to fall asleep at a moment's notice. The most familiar trait to the sensei was his short red hair and loose green robe that flowed to the bottom of his feet, with a small white poncho-like cloth around his neck. Almost as if he had seen him somewhere before. Who are you? Did you do all this? He demanded. No, he calmly replied. You did. Tsukumo's eyes opened with wide shock. What was he talking about? This? I've done no such thing. You drove me to this white fan of the leaf. He calmly stated, his anger easily apparent behind his voice. White fan of the leaf? And that red hair? Yes, I see now. Is your father's name Shurigo? He asked. The young man nodded. I'm surprised you stopped to find out his name, you animal. His anger continued to soar in his voice as its mellowness slowly began fading. Then you're Sasori. Sasori of the Red Sand. He couldn't believe it was him. The son of the 2 elite sand ninja he had fought was standing right in front of him. Yet he was so young. It only took him a moment to realize Sasori had a hand in a stiff hold. He figured at this point he was using a puppet jutsu to hold him in place and set up the trap of the Iron Maidens behind him. Sasori. Your parents were due not insult them by attempting to speak for them. His eyes widened, proclaiming his loss of control imminent. His index and ring finger curled into his palm as the cuffs restraining Tsukumo tightened. He then realized the cuffs were lined with tiny spikes as they dug into his ankles, bringing the white thong to his knees as he struggled to keep his footing. They weren't ready for that mission. Not just them. They had just become jonin by rank. The 3rd Kazekage had too much faith in them. He sent them to their deaths. Tsukumo wondered what was stopping the boy from killing him. He had him completely at his mercy. Not something he was known for, being submitted like that, and to do so was something anyone would be delighted to do. But they would also kill him and take his head as a trophy. So why was he waiting? Didn't he want revenge? I've found my peace. My granny showed me the path to eternal beauty. Now I'll live for as long as it takes to make you suffer for what you have done to me. Do you have any idea what it was like? No parents, the looks people gave me. The rumors about why I was always alone. His eyes went from maniacal to anger as he focused on him. Now it's my turn to show you what it's like. Sasori. Tsukumo called him. Your parents were only following orders. So did I. We had no choice in this matter. It was a war we had no control over. Sasori smirked as he turned around, walking towards a long stone slab. A sheet hung from the corners. He pulled the sheet off as he turned back to face Tsukumo. I'm going to do something nice for you, white fan of the leaf. He looked confused. What was he planning to do? My parents never had a choice because they were dedicated to the Kazekage. Everyone has a choice, but it is your commitment to your duty that narrows it so. However, this time there is no more narrowing. Your choices will be clear. As he finished, he picked up what appeared to be a body and slumped it over his back. As Tsume paid more attention, he knew exactly what he was looking at. The third Kazekage. And from what it seemed, he was still a regular person. Not a victim like the hundreds of other unfortunate souls plastered inside the room. You killed him? So it was you? He chuckled. The third Kazekage was the greatest ninja to come out of the hidden sand. Well, he wasn't too strong for me. But he will prove an invaluable item to my collection once I kill him. His eyes opened. He knew what this was all about now. These people, this room of fear and puppets, it was a laboratory. Sasori was turning these people into puppets in order to perfect a human puppet. And the third Kazekage was next on his list. He's not dead yet, he thought. But he's not giving off any signs of life. He must be under some kind of poison. Good, there's still a chance then. I have to stop him. I can't let him turn him into a puppet. There's no telling what could happen. He desperately began thinking to himself. He tried to run after getting on his feet but stopped as he heard a loud mechanical screech. He turned his head to see the product of his actions. The casket door of the Iron Maidens had begun closing. They were now halfway closed. I see, this is what he meant by choices. If I try to save the Kazekage, those caskets will close and they'll all die. This boy is clever and sick. Well? Sasori asked, now relaxed as his eyes fixed down to his pre-sleep appearance. Your choice is very clear. My sources tell me this mission is an absolute must succeed. Surely the lives of these 3 shinobi and a dog are worth sacrificing to stop me? Isn't that the rule of a shinobi? The success of the mission above all else? He was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He knew if he had only a second to freely charge at him, he could more than likely stop him and save the Kage. But if he did know, there has to be another way. I'm not leaving my students behind to finish this mission. Does it hurt, White Fang? Being forced into making a decision? You've grown a bond for these 3 fools. It must pain you knowing you could lose those you care about on an important mission, doesn't it? I can't let him get to me. There's got to be another way around this. He turned his head to examine the threads that were attached to the casket openings. All right. Let's see. My hands are free and I still have my blade with me. If I can lob these threads off in one swing, I can take the burden off my shoulders and fight him without any distraction. But how do I know those threads aren't rigged with something else? There's no time to think about that. I have to do this now. He knelt down into submission, placing his hands behind his head. All right, Sasori. You win. I can't beat you, not like this. He leaned his hands behind the back of his head as he slowly began a formation of hand signs. Sasori was anything but an idiot. He immediately picked up that something was not right. This mission's severity was too great for someone like the White Fan of the Leaf to give up so easily. But he decided he would play along. He was ready in case he tried to pull a fast one. And that's just what Tsume had planned. As he finished his hand sign, he reached for his blade with his left and quickly threw his arm behind him. He had his right hand hanging down as he tossed the blade horizontally, cutting all 9 chakra threads and being caught by his right hand as he was already racing towards him. Leaf-style dance of the crescent moon. Sasori noticed Tsume change into 3 as they formed around him at light speed in a triangular position. One in front and the one to the right were dead close, but he easily dodged them, still holding the Kazekage, until he noticed the one on the left was nowhere to be found. He looked up quickly to find Tsume only a few feet away from him, with his blade coming straight down to carve into his skull. And it connected. Tsume felt his chakra blade slice down his head through his face until it met with where it connected with his neck. And then immediately he pulled his blade through the right side of the face, slicing that half of the head off the shoulders completely, and held it to his right as he blocked a kunai from Sasori. Glancing back, he saw that the Sasori he thought he had killed was a simple wooden puppet that fell to the ground. A puppet clone, I see. Hard to pick up since they require no hand seals. They're connected with puppet jutsu. He nodded. You really are as fast and powerful as they say you are. That technique you created it, didn't you? Sasori complimented, pulling a free hand out with 3 chakra strings attached as they revealed to be connected to the other caskets behind him. It's clear that I cannot beat you. Not by myself. Had I not had this bait to find my exit, this could become very problematic. As much as I would love to use myself, we will have to meet again someday. He quickly looked back as he was about to call out a jutsu. The Iron Maidens aren't simple caskets of spikes. They're puppets. 3 new creations that have far exceeded my expectations. He maniacally looked at Tsume as he said the move out loud. Secret black move Iron Maiden. Immediately as he finished, 3 other puppets appeared from behind the now apparent puppets and broke apart into 8 pieces each. As each piece separated, long blades emerged from each side as the caskets closed on each of the ninjas. Tsume immediately broke his connection with Sasori as he jumped up facing diagonally towards the closed puppets. They had a completely different appearance from when he first saw them. Genjutsu. I should have known. He made the puppets out to be the real thing when they were just lace traps with no spikes on the doors. How did I miss that? In a frantic rush to save his students' lives, he made a quick flurry of hand signs as he finished. Lightning style lightning bind. He made it just in the nick of time. The puppets acted as the receiving points to carry the barrier together as it shot up as soon as all 24 blades attempted to impale the puppets but were easily deflected by the jutsu. Relieved he had saved his students for the moment, he landed and turned around only to find Sasori and the body of the 3rd Kazekage gone with a large hole in the ceiling. Without question, he jumped through to find Sasori standing waiting for him with the Kazekage's body laying next to him. Powerful and annoying, he said as he pulled his hands together to begin making a hand sign only to pick up Tsume's chakra directly behind him. He had no time to react as Tsume easily dug his knee into his spine, knocking him forward and spinning as he landed to the ground, but before he hit the ground Tsume was already behind him, burying his fist into his stomach, slamming him straight onto the ground, creating a crack onto the roof he was now laying on. He grunted as he looked up at Tsume, having his chakra blade staring directly into his face. You're done, Sasori. It's over. He chuckled at his statement. Nothing is ever over. He raised his left hand to make a hand sign, but Tsume's foot stomped on it, crushing it into the ground as the sound of cracks and stifled grunts left the puppet master's mouth. Got you, he thought as he opened the palm of his right hand and placed it onto the roof they were on before calling out a jutsu. Earth-style earthquake slam. Tsume couldn't stop him. The vibration of the entire dome they were standing on began trembling violently as he struggled to keep his footing. I told you, White Fan, he said, laying down still. Your choice is very clear. Then it hit him. He had to act right now. If he killed Sasori, he wouldn't have enough time to get down and save the others. The question flashed like a strobe light of an infinite amount of questions. Save his students or complete the mission? And the students were chosen. In a flash, Tsume was gone as he descended into the shaking death-like laboratory. The barrier had fallen due to the quaking coming from the jutsu, and the puppets were all laying down on the floor, one of them rolling away from the other 2. He ran up to the first one, ripping the right half of the door open to find Shibi wrapped up in what appeared to be a web of pure chakra. He grabbed him and laid him down as he opened the next puppet to reveal Hayashi in the same state as Shibi, just as unconscious as the latter. Laying the Hyuga down next to the Aburame, he dashed towards the runaway puppet, stopping it and tearing it open to reveal Kayasato and Tamamaru both wrapped up together. He quickly made 2 other shadow clones as the original picked up the obviously heavier package as the 3 Tsukumos quickly ran towards the hole in the ceiling and jumped up out of the large dome that was beginning to collapse. They quickly ran down the original Tsukumo, turning back and realized Sasori and the 3rd Kazekage were now long gone. Finally reaching a safe distance several hundreds of feet away from the still crippling dome, Tsukumo released the 2 clones as he used his blade to slowly cut away the chakra threads. Upon opening their eyes, he could tell they were all under a very powerful genjutsu, most likely created by Sasori to ensure they wouldn't try to escape. Release. he said, releasing Hayashi as he quickly worked over to Kayasato, then to Mamoru, then Shibi. The three young jonin groaned as they sat up, totally unaware of their surroundings and what had just happened with them. Tsukumo-sensei, what happened? Hayashi asked first. Tsukumo simply shook his head. We failed, I failed. What? Kayasato asked, still dazed from just waking up. What happened? The person who kidnapped the third Kazekage and the other people was in fact the missing Nin the fourth was telling us about. Sasori of the Red Sand. He got away. So what of the third Kazekage-sensei? Shibi asked. Gone. Sasori was capturing the ninjas to experiment on them. He was making human puppets out of them. Harvesting them. The third wasn't there yet, but before I could stop Sasori, he forced the decision to save you or the mission on me. He stood up after kneeling down from waking everyone up. I'll explain on the way back. We'll need to report to the fourth Kazekage immediately. You threw away the Missy, Hayashi tried to ask but was stopped when Kayasato covered his mouth. He shook his head, not approving of the action he was about to take. Yes, Tsukumo said. And I'd do it again. You three are some of the best students I have ever had, if not the best. Knowing you all for so long and knowing I only had a moment to make a split decision, I chose to abandon the mission to save your lives. He started walking back towards the direction of the sand village after noticing the far-off light across the dune sea. Let's go. This is my responsibility and I will be the one to accept it. The four ninja and dog made their way back to the sand village in defeat, neither saying a word. The decision to abandon the mission was made by the one person they were told that failing was not even an option to consider. One could only wonder what the reaction of the Kazekage would be, and even worse, the leaf. Chapter 20. Dad? His father had been staring out into the sea again. He got quiet after Kiba asked him what happened after their failed attempt to rescue the third Kazekage. He finally snapped out of it as he brought himself back. Oh right, sorry son. He turned to face his son on the right. After the mission we didn't see much from Tsukumo-sensei for quite some time. I would occasionally see him for a brief moment, but he would be gone as quickly as I would see him. He did everything he could to avoid the public, especially us three. Why? Hayashi was very upset that he abandoned the mission to rescue us. Whereas Shibi and I had no real opinion on it, Hayashi was insulted that our sensei did not trust us enough to save ourselves. Truth be told, we couldn't, and I think he knows that. But the type of political backlash we received from this mission failure put the entire village in a bad light, and they all needed someone to blame. The third Hokage would often speak in his defense, but no one agreed. He was vilified within his own village he had sworn to protect. Dad Kiba looked on at his father, who seemed to have taken a sad but thoughtful expression upon his face. What happened then? Well, his father began rising to his feet. They had been sitting at the dock for what felt like days, talking about their lives and catching up. Time was not measured here. It was always daytime. He stood waiting for his son to join him, which he did quickly, putting on his sandals as his father began walking away from the dock towards a narrow dirt path, both sides to it with tall grass and out-of-control flowers blending into the natural greenery. Like I said, we didn't see him much. I would see Kakashi from time to time and he seemed alright. Of course, ever since he started wearing that mask over his face when he entered the academy, it was difficult to read how he felt. Their walk was slow but steady despite their destination was not set, nor did it seem like it would be. Heh. He still wears it. His father smiled. Glad to know some things didn't change. Scene change, Conan stand down. Nagato. Just do it. Naruto couldn't make out the figure of the man standing in front of him. The darkness was covering his face and what appeared to be a chair he was sitting in. As he stepped closer, he realized he wasn't a man in a chair. More of a sick, dying man locked in a coma, barely clinging to his life. There's no way this man could be. Are you the Real Pain? He asked. Nagato chuckled. So peace has come to me, huh? Peace, that word echoed throughout the Jinchuriki. His vision flashed back to the image of Jiraiya laying dead at the feet of the 6 paths, impaled by the blades he had used to try and kill him with. To Kakashi pinned in between rubble as his head sank down in defeat and exhaustion, blood long sing dried against his mask. To Shino, who laid with his back against the wall of an alley alone with a small smile across his face covered with chaffed and roasted skin. His sunglasses laid to his side unfolded and neatly sat beside his foot where the wind would not carry it away. And finally to Thimage of Kiba in an openly demolished area of the village. His arm weakly wrapped around the side of his former best friend, his body filled with crusted holes and still flowing gashes across his body. Under his headband between the sweat and the blood was a single strand of pink hair dancing in the wind as it finally gave way, flying off with the current. "Do you hate me?" Naruto stood merely feet away from Nagato. The man responsible for Jiraiya's death, Kakashi's death, Kiba's death, Shino's death, and the countless lives taken from the village and several others. His anger, his hate, his fury was keeping his legs completely stiff. He almost couldn't move at all, but his anger could destroy mountains and remove them from existence completely if he willed it. "Your enemy is right in front of you," said Nagato. And it was true. But he wasn't anything like he had imagined. Skin and bones, poles sticking out of his back, a large chair with 2 large cuffs holding his hands separately, and 6 small mechanical legs which appeared to be his only means of transportation. He looked like he hadn't eaten, slept, or bathed in weeks. He looked miserable, decrepit, and completely at his mercy. "You want to take your revenge, right?" He did. His control was loosening faster and faster with every passing moment, flashing back to his confrontation against the Deva path. "A chain of hatred will start. I created the Akatsuki in order to break this chain of hatred. Even if you kill Nagato and take your revenge, nothing will change. The only thing that will come out of it is your own self-satisfaction." Konan defended Nagato, standing at his side but close in case something were to happen. Naruto's mind raced back to his meeting with his father. As long as the ninja system exists, the monster called hatred will keep giving birth to new creatures like pain. Being a ninja means fighting that hatred. Every ninja is fighting that hatred. Jiraiya-sensei left the job of finding the answer to end this hatred up to you. There is nothing someone like you who doesn't have an answer can do. Nagato talked down to him. Your role is just to be a sacrifice for the sake of the peace I will create. As soon as he finished, a latch on his large chair opened up and a large metal blade similar to all the other ones he had seen before shot straight towards him. Naruto didn't flinch as he allowed the blade to pierce his chest. His upper body collapsed onto the pole but still kept his footing. "I can freely control your movements from this distance with my chakra," Nagato said calmly. "Don't worry. I didn't hit any of your vital organs because you're a valuable Jinchuriki." His usually flawless technique had finally been stopped. Naruto glared back up at Nagato, his eyes now a dark red as the Nine Tails chakra creeped out of Naruto, overpowering the disruptor blade and Nagato, at the same time exhausting him and causing his head to dip down. The amount of energy that surged back into him was something he was not expecting and surpassed even his own. When he looked up, all he could see was the spirit of the nine-tailed fox surging an incredible amount of power out of Naruto, easily subduing Nagato's normally impeccable technique in that instant. "What's wrong, Nagato?" Konan asked, concerned. Nagato slowly rose his head back up to see Naruto still standing exactly where he had been the entire time since he entered. He intentionally didn't dodge it so he could. "I was planning on talking to you on my way over here, but there was something else I wanted to find out," Naruto said. "Something you want to find out?" Nagato asked, confused and quickly becoming annoyed. "I wanted to find out how I would feel," Naruto said. "What am I going to do when I see my enemy right in front of me?" I didn't know the answer. "And? I can't forgive you after all," Naruto yelled, grabbing the pole embedded in his chest. "Now I want to kill you so badly I just can't stop shaking." As he finished, his grip on the pole strengthened as he mustered up more than enough strength and ripped it right out of him, tossing it to the ground. "Impossible," Konan thought. "Resisting Nagato's chakra from this distance, there's no way." Naruto wasted no time. As soon as the disruptor blade hit the floor, he was racing towards Nagato, his eyes still red, the sides of his eyelids shaded into an orange color as he re-entered sage mode. Konan threw herself in front of Nagato and Naruto jumped with a fist ready but stopped merely inches away from the paper user. Pervy Sage once told me that he believed that humans would truly understand each other when he said that I couldn't do anything but listen. His fist slowly loosened as he lowered his hand. When he told me that he would leave it up to me to find out how to stop it, I was just glad he accepted me as his apprentice. But I finally get what Pervy Sage meant now. I understand that it's not something as simple as that. But that won't change the fact that you can't forgive me. Regardless of the beautiful words spoken, human love is not noble enough to forgive someone that has transgressed as much as this. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Jiraiya-sensei's words were nothing but old-fashioned idealistic words. Those ideals are far too different from reality. You said that you were going to defeat me and create peace in the ninja world. Even if that's just an excuse to satisfy yourself with revenge, it is okay as long as that's your justice. His eyes focused more on Naruto, now giving a cold stare. You aren't God. And even after facing the harsh realities of this world, can you really believe the nonsense Jiraiya-sensei has taught you? Naruto took a small glance to the ground. When I found out you were Pervy Sage's student, I really wanted to ask you something. What is it? Nagato asked. His mind was confused, but he let his face keep a stoic appearance. Naruto picked his face up and stared directly at Nagato. How did you turn out like this if you were Pervy Sage's student? He took a breath before continuing. I know that you two aren't psychos who enjoy killing like the other Akatsuki members. Then again, I don't know anything about you. He took another step forward. That's why I want to give you my answer after I hear your story. Very well. Nagato said. I will tell you about our pain. Scene change. Did the moon exist in death? Apparently not. Kiba felt like he had been dead for years and years already, and with no actual track of time with his father, he felt that the events at the village had long passed, that his son had already grown to be a man and Sakura had most likely found another man. His father noticed his slowly saddening expression and finally spoke up. Something on your mind, Kiba? He looked to his dad. Oh. Nothing, just thinking, that's all. You miss your mate? He nodded. I do. I feel like I've been dead for years. It seems like in all the time my son may have already become a ninja grown up, and Sakura, well, she probably already found someone else. I still miss your mother. Huh? He glanced over at his father's subject hop. I think about her all the time. And I know she also thinks I'm a coward whom she scared away, right? Kiba only nodded. He was surprised he knew all that. Unless there was something he hadn't told him yet, that had to be it. His father smiled and looked straight ahead. They had been walking for forever and finally returned back to the docks where they had originally met. The recollection took him some time, but he was able to remember. It was a little after you were born. My squad had since been broken up. We were all seasoned enough to lead our own squads, so we only saw each other every so often. As for Tsukumo-sensei, it was once in a blue moon any of us would see him. Flashback, table for two, sir? The waiter asked. 3. I'm waiting on someone else. Of course. Right this way, please. The host guided the shinobi to a table heading through a glass door to the patio area, which was lightly filled with the sound of piano and jazz. There was no question of the quality in this restaurant. Would you like a high chair for the child, sir? That would be nice, yes. Right away. The host quickly made his way off to retrieve a high chair. A few minutes passed by until the glass door opened and out stepped Kayasato, dressed in similar shinobi attire as the person who was waiting for him. Kayasato Inuzuka. Late as ever. He said, standing up. Fugaku. It's been too long. Kayasato smiled as the Inuzuka and Uchiha greeted each other with a strong hug. He took a seat across from him and noticed the young boy being sat in the high chair as they ordered their drinks. He came alone as Tamamaru insisted on it. They were old friends and ironically became friends after their fight in the Chunin exams. You brought Itachi? Yes. He happily nodded. Itachi, say hi to Kayasato. Itachi was still a toddler, roughly around 5. His hair was fairly short, but he was clearly developing his intelligence at a young age. Hi, Mr. Kyo. Are you the same man who married Dad's teammate? Kayasato chuckled at how forward he was. That's right, Itachi, I married Tsume. She's scary. My daddy always told me that sometimes on missions that Itachi. He looked at him. The young Uchiha quickly stopped talking. He's a handful, but he's showing considerable promise. Indeed. Kayasato said. Hard to believe how quickly we became parents. It feels like yesterday that we were just little genin. Fugaku slightly chuckled. It's true. We've grown up quite a bit. And you? I heard Tsume had just recently given birth to a second child. Poor woman must feel cramped not being able to go out on missions. Kayasato shrugged. She seems to be happy with what she's doing right now. Once Hana goes to the academy, she only needs to wait and see if our son will do the same. Once that's done, I'm sure Minato will let her back onto active duty. Fugaku shook his head. Minato, who would have thought he would become Hokage? Not me. But he's the right man for the job even if he doesn't look like it. I agree. He's so young, but he's very well kept for his age. The waiting brought them their drinks, and after ordering he brought their meals back to them. So you mentioned a son, Kayasato? What's his name then? Kayasato smiled. Kiba. It's a strong name for a son, and it's an Inuzuka name as well, isn't it? It is. Tsume named Hana. I told her it was only fair I named our son. Your daughter is about the same age as Itachi, isn't she? Kayasato nodded. Yeah. Hana's maybe a few months younger than Itachi, but they should see each other in the academy. Fugaku smiled. Interesting to see how that fight would be. Think it would be much different from ours? Kayasato laughed. Fugaku Uchiha, I don't think anything could replicate our fight. It was something else. You showed me several things. Not just techniques but a more moral message. I think we each taught each other different things that fight Fugaku. I agree. So head of the military police force and of the entire Uchiha clan, huh? Fugaku nodded. It's not as fun or enjoyable as it sounds. But it's my duty and I proudly carry it out. And you? I hear you're training a team of Chunin. Tsukumo's son Kakashi and one of my subordinates' boys. Kayasato also nodded. Have been for a while. I insisted on getting Kakashi since his father trained me. And Obito is a good boy. Usually a few minutes late to our meetings, but his heart is in the right place. Unfortunately, my request for an all-male squad was denied. Our medical ninja Rin is very gifted and talented, but I feel she's a, how would I put it, distraction for Obito especially. I see. He's just of age, he'll get over it like everybody else. Fortunately for us, Tsume was much too frightening to be much of a distraction. Both the men laughed at the thought of that image. The young Itachi simply sat and stared, unsure of what to say, before looking out to see several citizens walking behind another one, apparently shouting things at him he had never heard before. Let me tell you, Fugaku, all that scariness she has is properly vented. And I sure as hell feel it in the morning. Haha. And I thought it was supposed to work the other way. Daddy. What Itachi? I see the white fan of the leaf. Fugaku and Kayasato both looked in the direction of Itachi's finger, seeing Tsukumo walking alone while a small group of citizens followed close behind him, yelling profanity and throwing rocks at him the entire way. Fugaku? Yeah. He turned to look at Itachi. Son, stay here. Whatever happens, do not move, understand? Itachi nodded. Yes, father. Scene change, fucking pussy. Shouted one of the villagers, throwing a rock at Tsukumo. You call yourself the white fan of the leaf? You were our guardian and you sold us out, you motherfucker. The world around him was just noise. Just white noise for Tsukumo now. The day after his mission had ended, it was always like this. The people had grown to hate him, despise him, and detest his very existence. He couldn't even see his son at the Chunin exams without getting some form of heat. And his students, he couldn't stand to look at them anymore. He let them down, he let everyone down. His own son too, he knew he did, even though he always said how he looked up to him. One of the villagers finally ran up in front of him and got in his face. You're the reason we're at war. You started all this, you piece of fucking shit. Tsukumo ignored him and simply kept walking, but that angry citizen wasn't having it. Don't walk away from me, you motherfucker. He grabbed his shoulder and turned him around to face him. Do you know how many good people we've lost because of you? Because you couldn't do your fucking job? Good solid men gave their lives for your fuck-ups. You make me sick. He finished spitting in his face. Again Tsukumo did nothing but turned and kept walking. I didn't say you could walk away, faggot. He yelled, running him to him with a fist ready to hit him in the back of the head. And just as the fist was about to connect, it was stopped. The man looked to his left to see a fully equipped Jonin standing there. His straight brown hair carried itself in the wind, even in its long ponytail lengthy towards his upper back. The red triangles warned him already. He knew who was stopping him. I think it would be a good idea if you went home, Kayasato said stoically. Yeah. Says who? You? I know who you are. Kayasato Inuzuka. You're one of the shitheads who was on the mission with Tsukumo. Far as I'm concerned, you're almost as bad as him. Hilarious how ignorant the people are to what really happened. No wonder nobody takes them seriously. The hell did you just say? The man said, getting out of his grip and stepping back. He said you're an idiot in a nice way. Oh yeah, bitch? The man turned to his right but stopped when he saw it was Fugaku dressed in his military police uniform. Yeah, bitch. He quickly closed his eyes and opened them just as fast to reveal his Sharingan. What the fuck are you gonna do about it? Fugaku said, getting directly into his face. Hit the captain of the Leaf Village military police force. I'll show you what the fuck I can do. The other villagers slowly backed away, not wanting to anger the head MP. You better walk home before I arrest you and all your little friends here for harassment and attempted assault. Got it? The troublesome man did nothing but quickly ran off with the others. Fugaku deactivated his eyes and looked back at Tsukumo. Are you okay? He looked, but he was gone. So was Kayasato. They're gone? He looked around again but imagined they were already gone. He walked back to his meal and finished it with his son before taking him home. Scene change, the day was coming to a close. As the sun slowly walked downstairs into the horizon, Tsukumo kept his slow pace through a small garden. It was around the season when the trees were blooming and leaves and petals tracing across the field was an average thing. Kayasato only watched his sensei walk, not even stopping to acknowledge him. Sensei, wait please. He ran up behind him. Why are you doing this? Why are these people doing this to you? The village needs someone to blame. And it is something only I can carry. Because of me the third Kazekage is gone. He finally stopped, keeping his back to his student. No, it isn't. You made the choice to save us because you knew there would be another time for us to redeem ourselves. I don't blame you, and neither does Shibi. Hayashi thinks different. Man, fuck Hayashi. He's so full of himself. He thought he could get us all out of that situation we were in, but he was just as knocked out as we were. You were the only one who could save us, and you did. No. He's right. The mission was a top priority. I even told you that before we left, remember? Yes, of course I remember, Sensei. But you can't keep going on like this. Don't you see what's happening to you? He said nothing. Kayasato, you're a young ninja with a very bright future ahead. You married a powerful ninja and have fathered 2 children already. They'll become strong just like you. He turned back to face him. My final lesson for you is this: don't become me. And as he finished, he vanished in a puff of smoke. Tsukumo-sensei, wait. He ran to the smoke, but as it dissipated he could tell he was long gone. He fell to his knees, punching the soft grass below him as the petals of the cherry blossom trees flew past his face. Damn it. Why couldn't I stop him? Don't become me. What does that even mean? He sat down with his legs crossed as he looked up at the sky. Sensei, funny. I never thought you were one for gardens, Kayasato. He slightly turned his head to catch a glimpse of who was speaking to him. An old friend he hadn't seen in quite some time. Shikaku? The lazy Nara took a seat next to him in the grass. I overheard your talk with Tsukumo-sensei. He's really in a tight spot by the sound of it. Kayasato kept his face to the stars. It's complicated. Yeah. I know all about complicated, believe it or not. Much as I hate it, it's something I'm rather experienced with. You know, I always thought when we were this old all these problems would just stop. After starting a family, the problems we had during our childhood, I thought it would all just eventually fade away. Shikaku shook his head. It doesn't get any easier, does it? Nah. Never does. They sat in silence for a few moments. A shooting star whipped its way across the sky. I'll let you have this wish. I think you need it more than me. Shikaku said. Heh. Yeah, maybe you're right. What to wish for? Maybe a calmer wife? No, that wouldn't be any fun. Oh shit, did I already waste my wish? He closed his eyes for a moment before finally coming to a conclusion. I wish my children, no matter what it takes, I wish my children to grow up proper and to become great ninja. So that they can stop this violence. That they can put an end to all of this. Yeah, that's my wish. He finally opened his eyes before turning to Shikaku and smiling, nodding his head to tell him he was done. That took a while. Must have been a pretty big wish. Yeah, kind of. Tell you what, it's getting late. He stood up, offering his hand down to the Inuzuka. Why don't you come back to my place for a drink? There's something I want to show you, and you can tell me some more about what's on your mind. Kayasato hesitated for a moment but took his hand as they stood up and began walking towards the Nara household. Scene change, the messenger bird flew quickly towards the Inuzuka household as Kayasato walked inside the Nara home. He figured Tsume wouldn't be too upset as long as she knew where he was, and hopefully he wouldn't be too long. He followed Shikaku inside to find Yoshino, who was sitting on the couch holding a baby in her arms as she watched television. Finally home, I see. She said, not turning her head. Hey Shikaku, Kayasato whispered. You didn't tell me you had a kid. He shrugged his shoulders before turning his attention to his wife. I know. I ran into a friend. Yoshino turned her head to see who was with him. Ah, hello Kayasato. It's been a while since Shikaku mentioned you, much less seen you. How are you? I'm good. It's great to see you again, Yoshino. I didn't know you two had a child, otherwise I would have brought something. It's fine really, she glared at Shikaku. Old Faithful here doesn't like attracting a lot of attention. It's such a drag. He added in. Anyway, she motioned for them to come over, which they did. This is Shikamaru. He's only a few months old, but he's a good boy. Barely cries or yells and spends most of his time just sleeping. He looks a lot like you, Shikaku. Shikaku shrugged his shoulders, letting a small smile escape his face. What can I say, I'm pretty lucky. I heard you and Tsume had another child. She said. He nodded. Yes. He's around the same age as Shikamaru. We named him Kiba. It's a nice name. And how is she? Tsume? She's good. A bit cooped up, but she's handling it all right, I think. Yoshino smiled. That's good. I'll have to stop by and bring Shikamaru. It would be so nice for the boys to enter the academy together. It would. He replied. Shikaku finally broke the mood. I'm sorry, Yoshino, but there was something I wanted to show Kayasato. We'll be in the back. She nodded. Okay. I'll bring some drinks for you too as soon as I put Shikamaru to bed. The two jonin made their way to a back room. Both removing their shoes, Shikaku took to one side of a small table, and after looking closely, Kayasato could tell what it was: a shogi board. Shogi? He asked. He nodded. I know there's a lot on your mind, and I know it would take a while. Sometimes it's easier to express yourself through different things. Playing instruments, fighting, or board games like this. He knelt down to the opposite side of Shikaku. Your move, Kayasato. End flashback, Shikamaru is just like that now. Kiba said. Is that right? That's something else. Actually, now that I think about it, me and Shikamaru played a game of shogi a while back. His father gave him a surprised look. Really? Yeah. When I was having trouble with Sakura, Shikamaru showed me something, but it was after I played a game of shogi with him. Him too? Hee hee, I guess they're more like us than we thought. Dad? Yeah. Do you think it's a Nara thing? I don't think so. I think they're just drawn to that game due to it being a thinking game. Shikamaru's father was a master at it, and I'm sure his son is no different. That's true, he thought for a second. So what happened after that? His father patted him on the back. You're sure eager to find out about how I died, Hassan? Kiba laughed. I just want to know everything I can about my dad. He smiled, nudging his father's arm. Well, we kept playing. The game lasted for a long time. I was sure surprised, but what he said to me was even more of a surprise, yet it made sense. Chapter 21I. The Crimson Sunrise Checkmate. Shikaku moved his piece in a leap over several of Kayasato's, capturing his king and ending the game. Ah, damn it. He said. I never was really much for board games. Shikaku looked surprised. The game lasted for well over 2 hours. I don't think you're a bad player by any means. Kayasato looked at the clock. 8:18 p.m. He needed to get home. He stood up but was stopped with Shikaku telling him something. The way you play a game of shogi is usually symbolic of a person's personality. However, he pointed at the board. You played defense for almost the entire game. That's normally what I do. It seems out of character for you, and I was expecting a frontal assault early in the game. He shrugged his shoulders. Don't know why I played like that. I just tried to think logically. There's your answer. What is? When you're slow, you think more logically and sensible. You play a powerful defense and make more accurate decisions. He then stood as well. Just remember with Tsukumo to think slow. I think it'll be better that way. He nodded. Maybe, yeah. He turned and walked towards the door. He waved bye to the two parents and made his way home. Scene change, didn't take him long to walk up to the door. He could smell the scent of the three inside his home as he unlocked the door and stepped in. Tsume turned and looked at him but was exhausted from taking care of Kiba the entire day to give any sort of reaction. He would go through periods where he would cry for hours and then times where he would sleep and not bother anybody. Hannah was usually good and had taken a liking to coloring, which made her mother's job easier since all she needed was a few simple books and a box of crayons. Did you get my message? She nodded. Thank you for letting me know. She waved him to come sit by her, which he did. She leaned back into his chest as she rested her head at the top of where his vest zipper ended. How long has he been asleep? About 30 minutes. He hasn't been too noisy, but he's been feeding a lot. Lucky guy. He chuckled. She chuckled as well. You can't deny how much this one looks like you now. He nodded. My face, but it looks like he's getting the spiky hair like you have. It's not a bad mix, I suppose. She smiled, turning back to face him. He leaned in and kissed her. No. Not bad, a bad mix at all. Daddy. In ran Hannah from the kitchen with an open coloring book in her hands. She eagerly awaited his return to show him her latest work. Hey there, sweetheart. He said, kissing his daughter's forehead as she sat next to him. It really was a rare occurrence that all of the family was together, but it was something they all enjoyed. Look, Daddy. Hannah shoved the opened book into his face. Okay, let's look. That one. She pointed over to the picture of the dog on the left. It was a picture of an adult husky sleeping on a dog bed. Its hind leg was put in a cast. Much to her father's surprise, it was surprisingly well done. Everything was kept in the lines. The amount of gray, blue and white was very well mixed into the fur. Even the eyes were taken into careful detail. The right was drawn in a deep sky blue where the left was a basic brown color. Wow, Hannah, this is great. He said, no bullshit behind his voice. He had expected the drawing to be subpar at best. Let's be honest, not all kids knew how to color in the lines at age 5, yet much less use colors to properly shade and practically recreate the dog. Mommy said I had to leave the big leg white. Kayasato laughed. It's not a big leg, sweetheart. That's what we call a cast. What's a cast, Daddy? It's what you wear when you get hurt so that you get all better. It keeps all the bad things that can hurt you away from it. Can I get a cast? He smiled as he shook his head. No, baby, you don't need one. You aren't hurt. The dog in that picture was hurt, that's why it's wearing a cast. No. Is it going to be okay? It's just a drawing, honey, relax. Tsume reassured her daughter. Do doggies really get hurt like this, Mommy? Sometimes. That's why they have vets to make them big and strong again. Kuramaru and Tamamaru walked side by side into the living room. Each dog sat at the foot of their masters without saying anything. Tsume smiled when she noticed how well they were getting along now compared to when they first got married. It was chaos trying to keep them from killing each other every time they were in a room together. It was nice now that Kuramaru and Tamamaru could talk at this point. It made getting things clear much easier. Can I be a vet? It's a vet, baby, and yes, you can be one once you're old enough. Her father said. She crossed her arms and huffed. I don't want to wait, Daddy. She looked at her mother. Mommy, do I have to wait to be a vet? She nodded her head. Yes, that's because you have to learn how to take care of the doggy, honey. When you get older, you'll learn exactly what to do so that way you can help dogs like those in the picture. Okay, Mom. She said. Her father lifted her mood by wrapping his arm around her shoulder and hugging her. He wrapped his free arm around Tsume as he held his family close together. No matter how bad the day was, nothing made him feel better about himself than knowing he had a family to come home to every night. It made his job as a ninja that much more important. He was never afraid to take up assignments that could pose threats to his life so long as he knew his family would be safe from them. Get ready for bed, Hannah. Tsume said. But I'm not tired, Mommy. She pouted. She looked at her father for support. Daddy, do I have to go to bed now? He shrugged his shoulders. If your mother says you have to go to bed now, you need to go to bed. She huffed and pouted but let herself off the couch and walked herself upstairs to get ready for bed. We'll be up to tuck you in soon. Her father called from downstairs. She smiled and nodded as she disappeared upstairs. Loud, but she's got potential. Kuramaru said. Of course she has potential, she's the master's daughter. Said Tamamaru. Funniest thing about the German Shepherd was his thick Irish accent. Kayasato still found it funny out how he came to develop his style of talking like that when no other ninjas or nin dogs spoke that way, but he was a faithful companion nonetheless and was a cherished member of the family. Will you shut up, you suck up? Kuramaru snapped. Yeah. What you gonna do about it if I don't? You gonna teach me a lesson, you old fool? Both dogs were now in each other's faces with their teeth showing, ready to go at it. Both their masters laughed. It was typical for the two dogs to clash. Each one was fiercely loyal to their master, but Tamamaru was a bit full of himself at times. Very faithful, but sometimes too faithful in his master's abilities. Such is a time when he said Kayasato could have a baby better than Tsume could. The embarrassed father had to explain to the proud nin dog that it was literally impossible for that to happen. Their growling didn't go unnoticed as an infant Kiba woke up and began wailing loudly at being awoken so suddenly. Ah, well done then, old man, you gone and woke the master's son up. He's not the master's son, you idiot, he's just as much the son of mine as well. Yeah. Says who? The hospital. All right, you two, that's enough, we have to calm Kiba down. Kayasato finally interrupted. He and Tsume stood up as they made their way to a back room to put Kiba down in his crib. Yeah. We have to calm Kiba down, you loud old bastard. Tamamaru playfully said while trotting off after his master. Kuramaru could feel his blood pressure rise. We're the same age, dumbass. What a fucking pain in the ass. He thought as he went to catch up with them. Scene change, Chapter 21-2. Innocence. The next few days were peaceful for the most part. Team Kayasato was finally finishing a mission and made their way back to the Hokage mansion to report in. I know I said it already, but you three did well today, Kayasato said. Especially you, Rin. Your medical jutsu has come a very long way in a very short amount of time. She happily smiled and nodded. She always thought her sensei didn't like her, but she couldn't figure out why. Thank you, Kayasato-sensei. The team entered the room to find Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage, sitting in his chair with his hands linked together as if he were expecting them the entire time. Mission accomplished, Lord Hokage, said Kayasato. The traitors made it back to their village. We had a slight scuffle with a few bandits, but we had no trouble taking care of it. I see, he said. Good work, you five. You three are dismissed. Kayasato and Tamamaru, please stay. The young Chunins obeyed as they left their sensei. I know I've been running this team harder than most. It's okay, Minato. I understand, he interrupted. Tsukumo's suicide was tough for all of us, especially Kakashi. Indeed. But that is why I needed to speak with you. Arf. Tamamaru barked to his master. Kayasato quickly translated his noise into "There's something he's not telling us, master." I know, boy. He turned back to the Kage. So what's going on? I had Fugaku take Tsukumo's body to get an autopsy. He stood up and walked in front of his friend. The blade that we thought pierced his heart had missed it. In fact, he would have easily recovered from the wound had circumstances been different. When we examined the blade and his body, we found poison. His eyes opened widely. He was murdered? He nodded. It was hard to distinguish, but we found traces of it in his bloodstream. This person knew what he was doing, and it wasn't just a simple murder. This was an assassination. Very few know about it, and I'm planning on keeping it that way. It's better if they believe he killed himself instead of raising panic of a terrorist attack. He tried to keep his calm as he nodded. Do we have any leads? Few. I had Shibi take some of the poison from Tsukumo's body and found it was not something the village produced. He handed him a report of the poison. He quickly read through it. Terrorists. And you think they're from the sand? Not necessarily. Jiraiya-sensei, and I believe it was someone Tsukumo had encountered seeking revenge. But the plants used to produce this poison do in fact hail from the land of wind. Kayasato dropped the reports to the ground as he realized who it was who did it. Who it was who killed his sensei and staged a suicide. Sasori. That gutless bastard, said Tamamaru. Where is he now? Kayasato asked. Kayasato Minato. Where the hell is he? He sighed. Kayasato, I can't send you on this mission. What? Why the fuck not? This is not a revenge mission. I need to bring Sasori in and interrogate him so we can gather the ingredients for his poison. If the Sand or any other villages are using this poison as biological warfare, we need a cure. We cannot risk killing him when he could provide us with valuable information. We are at war, you understand this, do you not? He gritted his teeth together at the Kage's stern face. I understand. Minato walked back to his seat and placed his hands on the desk. I'm sorry about all of this, but you needed to know that we are doing everything we can to bring him to justice. I informed Umbu to not let you out of the village. What? I'm sorry, Kayasato, but you're indefinitely barred from leaving the village. You spineless backstabber, barked Tamamaru. You go ahead and turn on us after all me and my master have done for this village? We fought tooth and nail for you, we did, and when this bastard kills my master's sensei you lock us up like a couple of rabbits? Tamamaru. He looked at his companion. There's nothing we can do. He whined. Master. Let's go. He said, turning around and walking out of the office, his Neen dog close behind him. Scene change, angry but collected, he walked out of the mansion and past the main gate of it back into the city. He failed to notice Kakashi leaned against the wall. Sensei? He turned to see Kakashi standing there looking at him. The small lock of hair that fell under his headband flew off to the left as the wind tried carrying it away. Kakashi? What are you doing here? The Hokage dismissed you and the others. I know, he said. But I know he wanted to tell you about my father. He smirked. You stayed and listened and I take it. He nodded. My father always spoke very highly of you. Even when he was depressed, he was ecstatic when he found out I was placed in your squad. I asked for you. I wanted to make sure of it. Your father taught me, so I figured it would be only fair I do the same. Are you really going to go after Sasori Kayasato-sensei? He noticed the scent emitting from his sensei's son. He was excited, hopeful, and even anxious. He couldn't possibly hope to go with him, could he? I can't take you with me, Kakashi. But sensei, he killed my father. I can't sit here and just let the murderer get away with it. Kayasato stared at his student. Kakashi did not show a lot of emotion, but this one of those few select times where it showed, and it was flowing like a white water rapid. His passion was unmovable. He wanted this. He sighed as he took his right foot and began tapping it to the ground. Kakashi listened carefully as he figured out he was using Morse code. Kakashi. Umbu is watching me as we speak to make sure I don't leave. Tomorrow night at midnight, meet me by the east gate. We can't go through the main gate, we'll risk meeting the most resistance along the way. Kakashi looked to his master and nodded, and they quickly disappeared in different directions. Scene change, Chapter 21-3. Carpe diem. Another late night in the Inuzuka household. With the child and baby asleep, Tsume and Kayasato finally had some alone time. They were still so young, but the life of parenthood matured you fast, they quickly found out. They each sat in their bed, the man leaning back with his left arm wrapped around Tsume as she wrapped both her arms around his bare chest. We never have enough of these nights, she said. What's that? He asked. When it's just us. When everyone's quiet and asleep. That's true. He then thought to himself. And I couldn't ask for a better night. If tomorrow should bring me the worst, then I should cherish this night the most out of any. I love you, he said, breaking the small gap in silence. Her embrace around his chest tightened. I love you too. Now's the best time, he figured. He moved her off of him as he crawled on top of her. Before she could say anything, he kissed her once to silence her before moving his lips to her neck and began layering them with kisses. Kyo, the kids. They're going to hear us. No. They're going to hear you. He looked up and winked at her. She playfully slapped the top of his head, taking his ponytail and untying it, letting his hair fall down freely. That's not my fault, is it? He kissed her. Maybe half. She smiled as she gripped his shoulders and tossed the sheet over them both. Scene change. Another bowl, please. Obito, slow down on the ramen. You said it was your treat, Kayasato-sensei. The newly opened Ichiraku's ramen was a big hit with most of the ninja here in the village. And it was a popular spot for many a sensei to lose most of their money treating their squad to a meal. Especially when a particular Uchiha went out of his way to gorge himself silly. Aw man, this is great. I love barbecued pork, he said, stuffing more food into his mouth. Kakashi narrowed his eyes to him. What a slob. He lowered his mask as he began eating at a more civil and easier pace. Poor Rin was in between both of them and awkwardly laughed as she began eating as well. This place just recently opened up not too long ago. I figured since we didn't have a lot of time to talk after the last mission, the least I could do is treat you all. Thanks, sensei. Obito said, finishing the 10th and final bowl as he patted his stomach in victory. Yeah, he looked down at his bowl. It was only his second, but after watching Obito scarf down a small village supply's worth of ramen, he suddenly lost his appetite. Here's the bill, sir. A younger Tucci said, handing him the bill. What? Kayasato looked at the bill and comically fell off of his chair at the amount he had to pay. Sensei. Are you all right? All three called to him, to Mamoru whining as he licked his master to try and awaken him, but the poor Inuzuka was too stricken with shock to move. Scene change. Bye guys. Obito waved to his team and sensei as he made his way home. Rin finished waving and turned to the two remaining men. I should go as well. Bye Kakashi. She bowed to him. Bye sensei. And with that she walked in the opposite direction as Obito on her way home. Kakashi tapped his foot on the ground, understanding that anything they spoke about avenging his father was being monitored by the Umbu units sent to observe his sensei by the Hokage. See you tonight sensei. And with the final word the two disappeared. Scene change, Chapter 21-4. The darkest of winter's night had finally come to the village, and the father of two wasted no time in preparing to head out. Quietly zipping his vest up, he stepped out of his room with his dog close behind him. He walked a few feet down the hallway and turned right. He cracked open the door to reveal Hana's room. She was sound asleep as he walked up to her sleeping form and kissed her forehead. Her blanket had fallen halfway off the bed, so he fixed it while putting it back onto her. Be a good girl for me. Daddy loves you. He whispered as he stood up and exited the room, slowly shutting the door behind him. In the room directly across from Hana's was Kiba's room. He opened it and stepped in, noticing his son's form. He had one arm across his chest and the other was holding on to one of the bars of his crib. The mobile above him had since stopped moving. 5 ornaments, each one was the image representing each hidden village: leaf, cloud, mist, sand and stone. Your mother has good taste, son. He whispered. He reached down and stroked the top of his head. His birthmark glistened in the moonlight that was hitting him but didn't seem to irritate him. He smiled as he noticed his son smile in his sleep, obviously in a deep dream from the looks of it. You can't deny how much this one looks like you now. Her voice echoed in his head as he looked down at his son. Maybe you're right. He leaned his head down and kissed the top of his head. Kiba, you're the man of the house now. Don't let Kuramaru push you around. I love you, son. He smirked as he turned and headed for the door. He turned back one more time. The crib was completely shrouded within moonlight, the sky was completely clear, and his son was sound asleep. It was true serenity to his eyes. It only edged him to do this more. People like Sasori needed to be stopped. Where there was one, there was bound to be more. He had to take the steps to stop people like that from ever reaching the village again. The image of his son sleeping right before him was motivation enough. No one should have to grow up living in fear. No one should have to grow up without parents. Even if I die, it won't be for nothing. Because I know my son will grow up to carry the will of fire just like we all do. He thought to himself as he stepped into the hallway and headed downstairs. As he stepped out of the door, he made a grave misplay. He never saw Tsume anywhere in the house. When he turned right to finally step into the street, she was standing there waiting for him. Arms falling down, no anger, just worry. Kuramaru was nowhere to be seen, which made him wonder how desperate this predicament was. I know where you're going. She whispered loud enough for him to hear. And it's after him, isn't it? He stiffly nodded. Sasori. She slowly walked up to him. You know that Umbu is watching every corner of this village in case you try and go after him, right? Yes. She grabbed his vest. Then why are you doing this, Kayasato? Don't you understand? If you do this, you'll be classified just like that man? You'll be a missing nin for completely disobeying the Hokage. Don't you get that? She began sobbing into his vest from the built-up frustration. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. This family, Kyo, we need you, I need you. Don't do this to me. Tsume, don't Tsume me, why are you doing this? Why? I have to. No, you don't. Tsume, he touched her face with his hands and lifted hers up to meet his. The 4th Hokage wants to interrogate a terrorist with unknown poisons. We shouldn't be finding cures for these poisons, we should destroy them so they can't hurt anyone. If he brings him into the village and he gets away, there's no telling how many lives could be lost. Including yours, Hana. Kiba, hell, the whole village. She finally let go of him and stepped back. So you're going to go and get yourself killed because you think you can beat him? He shook his head. That's not why. Even if I don't make it back, I can only hope the Hokage will understand my logic behind why I did what I did, and we do more than just wait and see, because that is not a world worth living in. Our children don't deserve to be raised in a world like that. There was no immediate response, only a punch to his left jaw. His head jerked back in the diagonal direction to the right as his eyes focused on Tsume's eyes. "You coward." Without giving him a chance to respond, she walked by him and entered back into the house. The sound of the door shut and the locks latching together sent a small chill down his spine. He turned back to the house as he and Tamamaru got some distance from it. "Tsume. I hope you someday understand my love. You know this is suicide, yeah?" Tamamaru finally spoke. "It's why I wouldn't have gone in without you. I couldn't do this without my best friend." He smiled at him. The dog wagged his tail. "You damn right you couldn't." Inside the house, Tsume slouched against the door, her back towards it as she gradually slid down to the floor, breaking down hysterically. She knew he wasn't coming back. That was the last time she was ever going to see him. She didn't tell him she loved him, she didn't wish him luck, she punched him. She called him a coward. That was how she said goodbye to her husband and to her children's father. If she tried to catch him, no, there was no way she could catch him. No way she could stop him. "Kiyosato, I'm such an idiot." She hung her head in despair and cried alone in the darkness of her home. Scene change. You can't build anything without foundation. Whether it's houses, bombs to blow shit up, or a suicide revenge mission that is a lose-lose situation, in the end you need blueprints. Slowly the two crept to the door leading into the Hokage's office. Obviously locked, they discussed their plans for extracting the files on Sasori's whereabouts and possible leads. "Remember the plan, boy. I'll set up a genjutsu that should keep us hidden in case any night patrol comes by. You get in there and find what we're looking for. I ready when you are." He nodded, holding his fingers up to his face. Man-beast clone. The German shepherd quickly puffed into a small cloud of smoke as it turned into an identical copy of his master. He nodded back as he began picking the lock to the door. His master made a quick flash of hand signs and set up a defensive genjutsu. A few moments later, Tamamaru cracked the lock, opening the door to reveal a dark and relatively spooky empty office. Right then. "The files should be about," he thought out loud, but tripped over a chair, falling flat on his face. He quickly picked himself up. Damn it. Would it kill the Kage to put on a night light or something? Quit fucking around, Tamamaru. If the Hokage comes back, he'll see the genjutsu and break it. This will only work with most people, so hurry up. Yeah, I hear ya. Bloody hell, where's the file at? He quickly filtered through a cabinet he just opened. Nothing. It was all local ninjas. Wait a minute. These are all genin. That must mean this one is Chunin, this one must be Jonin, and this one. He opened up the last cabinet on the end and was pleased with what he found. Jackpot, mate. He thought out loud. After a few moments of shuffling throughout the database of the missing nins recorded by the village, he finally stopped at Sasori. There was no image, simply a photograph with a question mark on top of it. Grimy bastard, love to hide himself, he does. He thought out loud again. He grabbed the file and sat in Minato's chair, opening the file and reading through it quickly to make sure it would check out. Afterwards he looked out and kicked his feet up on the desk. Tamamaru, the 5th Hokage. I like the sound of that, don't you, Kyo? Hurry the fuck up. He loudly whispered. Oh right. Time to go net us a fish then. He said, standing up and tucking the chair in. Making sure everything was closed up, he held onto the file as he exited the office, shutting the door. You realize they'll know we broke in, yeah? We can't fix this lock. He nodded his head, holding his fingers up again. Release. He stood back up his partner, then releasing himself from his clone form into his dog state. The file sat on the ground where Kayasato picked it up as they quickly left the mansion, keeping their presence hidden at all times. They had just broken into the Hokage's office, stolen classified documents, and were about to leave the village against all orders from the Hokage to hunt down a missing nin they were already going to bring in for questioning in an attempt to kill him. What a life, Kayasato thought to himself as they made way for the East Gate. Scene change, they took the long way around towards the East Gate, taking care to avoid any and all major hotspots where Umbu units could be watching out for them. Tamamaru stayed behind his master, and whenever they would make a footprint the dog would always brush his tail against it to erase the print covering their tracks as they walked. Finally reaching the east gate, they could see Kakashi was nowhere to be seen. That is until he heard a small set of tapping. He figured he was hiding and using Morse code to reveal himself. "It's all right, Kakashi, it's me." He jumped out from the top of a tree. "I had a shadow clone distract them. We should be okay for a few minutes." He smiled. "It's so simple, but it's genius when it is executed properly. You taught me that, sensei. And your father taught me that." He patted his shoulder. Kakashi walked a few steps in front of him, facing the entrance of the gate, which was left wide open. "My father spoke very highly of you. He always said you had the most potential out of the team because you always found a reason to keep going. He always said where there's a will there's a way. And now I think I finally understand what he means." Kayasato walked up closer behind him. "Whatever happens, Kakashi, keep training. Don't give up. Your father was one of the greatest ninjas ever to come out of the village, and he would never want you to stop training because of what happened to him." He stepped closer, merely inches from his back. "You've made me very proud, Kakashi. I couldn't have asked for a better student." Chop. His chop to the back of his neck connected as his young pupil fell to the ground unconscious. "I'm sorry, Kakashi. But where I'm going you can't follow. I wouldn't be able to face Tsukumo-sensei if anything happened to you." Seconds later, the light pitter-patter of footsteps were heard behind him. He turned to see an Umbu member dressed in a white cloak wearing a boar mask. "Sorry for the wait." Kayasato shook his head. "It's all right. It worked out better this way. I said what I needed to say for my sake anyway." The man walked over to the unconscious Kakashi and picked him up, slumping him over his shoulder. "How much do you want him to forget?" he asked. "Make sure he doesn't know his father was murdered. Tell him it was suicide. That's what the Hokage wanted everyone to think." "Gotcha," he said. "Anything else?" "Our plans for going after Sasori, make sure that's wiped. In fact, erase everything you can about Sasori just to be safe. It's possible he could remember all of this someday. These memory wipes aren't literal. They're only sealings. Are you ready to live with the consequences?" He shrugged his shoulders. "I don't think that will happen." He was silent for a moment, realizing what he really meant. "I see. Inoichi." He took his mask off, revealing his face. "Yeah. Thank you." He nodded. "You're a good man, Kayasato, and quite frankly I support what you're doing." He walked up to him and offered his hand. "I hope I see you again." He smiled as he took his hand as they shook. "Me too." Inoichi placed his mask back on as he took Kakashi and jumped roof to roof, heading towards an area he would be safe to perform his jutsu. He watched as they disappeared into the city. He turned back to face the black forest in front of him. He knew once he stepped out of the village there would be no turning back. "You ready, boy?" "Always ready, mate." "Let's do this." Scene change, Chapter 21v. Another world. They were several miles outside of the village at this point. They decided to take a break and take a read out of the file before advancing further. Upon further inspection, his location became that much more difficult to guess. They all pinpoint to areas within the sand, but that one time had to have been a coincidence. There's no way he'll still be there. "I think it's possible he joined up with a crew of some kind after defecting?" Tamamaru asked. "Maybe." He read through the file again before placing his finger under his known affiliations. "Akatsuki. That has to be it. But whereabout do we go finding us one of these lads?" He thought for another moment. "I'm not sure. I think at this point if the Akatsuki is anywhere here in the Land of Fire we'll run into them eventually. My guess is since they're a criminal organization it's likely they'll be causing trouble somewhere. Except I don't know where that will be exactly." He confessed, scratching his head. "Better off asking around, I think." "Maybe." They team made their way towards another town in the midst of the night, unaware of the person observing them. Kayasato Inuzuka. There's no mistaking it. He thought out loud to himself from a distance. Scene change, we don't really bring that name up around here, sir. Can't help you, said the man standing at the food stall. I see. Sorry for causing you any trouble. He waved as he and his friend made their way to an inn. At the very least, they could get a good night's sleep before continuing their search in the morning. They made their way to the front desk and were greeted by an older-looking man. He was bald, wearing a greenish-grayish jacket that went up to his chin. His mustache was a thick brown, both ends barely falling over the sides of the top of his lips. The most interesting feature of him were his two scars. Over his right eye was a long scar ending at his eyebrow, and two shorter ones lined parallel from each other crossing horizontally across his first long scar. Under that same eye was another scar, but this one was plain. He must have been a ninja in one of the wars. It was difficult for some veterans to make a living when they leave the service. Yes, sir, what can I do for you? He said, noticing his headband. Ah. We don't get many leaf shinobi around these parts. On a mission, friend? You could say that. I'm actually looking for someone. That right? Who might that be? I'm looking for a missing nin named Sasori. I doubt he's here, so I'm looking for the organization he's working for, the Akatsuki. I see. He nodded in understanding. Afraid I don't know a fella by the name of Sasori, but I do know the name Akatsuki. Do you know where I can find them? Your best bet will probably be to head towards the border between this land and the Land of Wind. There's supposed to be a secret hideout in that area. He crossed his arms. But you didn't hear it from Mia here? Of course. Kayasato replied. Could I get a room for the night? You sure can. One night? Yeah. That should be enough. While they exchanged information, the same ninja that had been following them listened to them through the ventilation duct above. He carefully pulled his bingo book out, flipping through the select ninjas he had been tracking in the Land of Fire. Hitaki Tsukumo deceased. He looked at the next ninja to find a picture of Shibi. Tsukumo's image had a large red X crossed over, indicating his death. Aburame Shibi alive. He turned the page to see an image of Hayashi and Kayasato. He stopped on the latter's image as he came to his conclusion. Inuzuka, Kayasato and Tomamoru alive and accounted for. He said to himself, glancing at the reward being offered by the bounty stations. 25 million ryo for Kayasato and 15 million for Tomamoru. For 40 million ryo, how could I refuse? He chuckled to himself. Scene change, there you are, sir. Room 40. Make a left from here and it'll be on your left. Thanks. He said, following his directions. Tomamoru nudged his master's leg as they came to the door of their room. Arf. Arf. I know. He opened the door and immediately threw himself on the bed. It was a regular room. One bed, one bathroom, a small kitchenette set up and a couch next to the door. How long you think before the buggar comes after us? Tomamoru asked. After we're asleep, most likely. Ah, this is the life, I tell ya. He replied to his master. Don't worry, I have a plan. Scene change, several hours carried over and the evening was beginning to show slight signs of light. The man who had been hunting them was growing impatient as time kept moving forward. He would prepare a strike, but at the last moment Kayasato would roll over and make a comment before falling back asleep. He was unsure if he was asleep or was an insomniac. No, Tsume, of course I wore one, don't worry. He gently took the vent filter away from the duct as he slowly lowered himself down. His eyes fixing himself on his heart as he prepared to stab it with a kunai he had drawn. However, just before he did, the Inuzuka rolled over again. Hey! Don't touch that, Tomamoru, he groaned as he lowered himself a little, the thread still supporting him as he inched closer before once again Kayasato rolled over. No, Hana, throwing marshmallows is a bad thing, bad girl. He was getting impatient as he finally got himself lowered within inches of his face. His knee accidentally touched Kayasato's leg as he mischievously giggled at the sudden touch, still asleep. No, Tsume, you know how I feel about bringing strange fruits to bed. The man positioned his kunai above Kayasato's heart and prepared to stab. The only thing coming to this bed is a dead man. And he connected his knife into his heart. Unfortunately, no blood came out of the wound. He snapped the thread holding him up and stood over the body. He touched it with his fingers and sniffed it. Gunpowder. He looked at the head as a fuse was slowly burning away mere inches from the body. He realized what it was all along. A bomb. He quickly ran to the window and jumped through it just as the explosion went off, throwing him several feet further than what he was expecting. A loud wave of fuck could be heard coming from him as he flew directly into a tree, freezing in place as he slowly slid down to the trunk. Kayasato and his canine friend descended to where the assassin was still plastered to the tree. That went well, I think. Got a few hours of sleep. I think the poor bastard's still alive? Probably. Just as they finished, the comically placed man disappeared in a puff of smoke. Shadow clone. Yep. Kayasato said. He looked over to Tamamaru, who nodded as the former jumped left the ladder, jumping right as a powerful fire jutsu landed where they were originally standing. The ninja then revealed himself. Reckon this is the real one, Kyo? Probably. He looked at the man who was now standing up facing, wore a white hood and a black mask on his face, with his eyes being the only visible part. At the top of his hood was his village's headband with a long horizontal scratch through the plate. The village hidden in the waterfall? That's nowhere near here, he thought. His eyes were different, probably the most noticeable feature about him. The only visible feature on his face was rather bright. Green irides, no pupils, and red sclera. As he got a better look at him, his appearance was undeniable. He may not have known his name, but he knew where he was from. A long black cloak with red clouds painted across them. I'm assuming you know who I am if you're still staring at me. Maybe. But why don't you go first? It's always nice to introduce. You're Kayasato Inuzuka from the village hidden in the leaves. And your fury friend behind me is Tamamaru. Okay. That's right. But you introduced us, not yourself like I asked. Kayasato, are you aware of the large bounty on your head? You and your four-legged companion are worth quite a bit of money. You hear that, Kayasato? We're quite the celebrities, says this one. I never did like the idea of being famous. Now who are you? The man chuckled slightly. My name is Kakuzu. And I'm here to collect. You're Akatsuki, right? He steps forward slightly. I'm looking for Sasori. If you tell me where he is, I won't switch your heart and brain from one another. Yes, Sasori. He said. He is my partner. He then pointed behind Kayasato. He's also standing right behind you. Kayasato's eyes widened as his hairs stood up on the back of his neck. He quickly pulled a kunai and swung directly behind him, clinging to another metal blade. As it appeared, he was correct. Sasori was right there directly in front of him now that he had turned to swing at him. Why you? It's been a long time, Kayasato. He quickly jumped back, flipping behind Kakuzu as he stood with Tamamaru. The two Akatsuki members now stood side by side as they each faced each other. I couldn't even feel Sasori's chakra. How did he conceal it so well? I couldn't even smell him. And that Kakuzu guy, I have a really bad feeling about him. How do you want to handle this one, sir? We can't take them as a group. We need to find a way for them to separate, but we need to group up so we can take one down at a time. He looked at Sasori, then to Kakuzu. Take Kakuzu. I have no idea what he can do, but Sasori is much more dangerous than him simply because we can't sense him or even smell him. As soon as you can distract him and knock him down, come to me, and we'll use that technique we've been working on. Ready when you are, /n doing this all on purpose, trying to fit the dialect of the accent, so if you see stuff like you are, I'm not forgetting the E, tongue sticking out, I'm just trying to focus on the pattern of speech. Also, if anyone who's Irish reads this, I'm trying my best to try and not offend anyone. I'm just trying something different. I apologize if I did so. Man-beast clone. Tamamaru quickly turned into the identical image again as they each prepared to take their respective opponents. You will not find revenge in this fight. Only death. said Sasori. I'm not looking for revenge. I'm after justice. Kayasato replied. Then you are already too late. Justice has been brought when I slayed the man who killed my parents. Liar. He growled as he took a stance, his feet giving a crushing amount of weight into the ground below them as his chakra began to flare up. I will leave the boy to you, Sasori. I'm sure I can handle the puppy on my own. I'm sure you can. In that moment Kakuzu and Tamamaru disappeared. The sounds of kunais and grunts between each person could be heard every few moments, but Sasori and Kayasato did nothing but keep their stare at each other. Neither willing to move a muscle. I wonder if he's watching this fight. Sasori said, breaking the silence. He's not watching the fight. He's watching me. Because he knows I can beat you and avenge his name and all the people you've experimented on, you sick motherfucker. Your foolish teacher did nothing but drive me to this. You have no idea the life of growing up with no parents watching others playing with their children. I was always by myself with no one to call my own except my granny. He pulled out a summoning scroll, unrolling it to reveal a puppet. And it was because of Sakumo and my granny that I achieved this power. Why stop now when I could do so much more? Upon further inspection, Kayasato knew exactly what he was looking at. There was no mistaking the puppet he was about to use to fight for him. It was the third Kazekage. You made him into your fucking puppet? He yelled at him. Eternal beauty. After perfecting the art of human puppetry, I could think of no one better to make as my own personal puppet than the San's greatest Kazekage. Kayasato's blood was starting to boil. His lack of care for human life was disturbing him and equally angering him. It would have been nice to change your old sensei into one, wouldn't you agree? His sense of control was beginning to loosen. His vision was turning red as his teacher's assassin was standing there belittling him, talking about him as if he were a toy. Had I done that, I could use him to fight against you. What an ironic battle that would be. The man who killed my parents I kill, turn him into my puppet, my slave, and he would be your opponent. Shut you up. He shouted at the top of his lungs. His grip on humanity had snapped. He could feel his instincts overflowing him as he allowed the feral nature of his blood to take him. The band keeping his hair up snapped as his hair furiously flowed. His nails had quickly grown in length, practically claws at well over 4 inches per finger and thumb. But his most noticeable feature were his eyes. They were completely white. His pupils were completely faded away. His already sharp fangs grew even further to a sizable 6 inches per fang, giving him a completely beast-like appearance at this point. The Inuzuka clan's Kekii Jinkai rare. Kayasato only heard what he said. He didn't respond. He didn't think he could. All he did was snarl as the thick slobber fell down his fangs. His mind was telling him one thing and one thing only: kill. And pointless. Sasori finished as he sent the Kazekage after the now completely feral ninja. It doesn't matter how long your claws are or how sharp you get your fangs, you're still just a worthless sap. His eyes then opened widely. And I'm going to enjoy adding you as my newest creation. The puppet opened its mouth to pour out its iron sand, which he used to create a katana. As it formed, he swung it at Kayasato, who easily dodged the sword by getting down on all fours and squatting below the swing of the blade. He slashed at the hand of the sword and knocked the blade out of its hand. When it opened its mouth again, Kayasato was already behind it as he slashed the chakra strings, keeping it up, and the puppet collapsed to the ground. What? He's that fast? And he was. As he finished that sentence, Sasori heard a low snarl behind him. The image he saw in front of him that was Kayasato was merely an afterimage. As the wind picked up, it slowly faded away with the jet stream. With no time to react, Kayasato slashed Sasori's back with both his claws and gave a powerful kick where he laid his X across his back. As he flew away from the power of his kick, he laid himself on all fours, howling to the moon before running towards him at an incredible speed not humanly possible. That's what it is then. Complete animal instincts. He's more beast than human now, complete with the speed and reflexes of them. I can't waste my time with this fool. He caught his footing and jumped just as Kayasato was about to clamp his fangs down. The puppet isn't broken so I can use it later. But I can't use him now. Not for this type of fight. He tossed his cloak off of his back as it flew to the ground. Kayasato jumped off his legs into the air, slashing the cloak off with his claws, loudly growling as he swung one of his claws to him. Sasori was able to block it and kicked him away before he could attack again, giving them a safe distance apart as they hit the ground. I was hoping to use this on Sakuma when we fought. But it was a poor environment and I knew I couldn't beat him. But this will work just fine. His body was unreal. Nothing he had ever seen before. He stopped on his fours, sniffing the new scent he had picked up. He slowly walked back to get a better view, not chancing anything. In place of his stomach was a thick cable coiled around a pole. Attached to his back was a scroll holder containing 4 scrolls. He also had a pair of poles to the back of his hips, each equipped with 5 large blades. I've never used myself before. I'm eager to see how this will work, he said, latching his pole from his stomach to a white oak tree. Kayasato said nothing except growl and snap at what he said. Heh. No wonder your clan's Kekii Genkai is so rare. Only the dumbest, most feral of your kind ever possess it. You lose all traces of your humanity and become a complete beast. He barked back at him, clearly showing an unappreciative take for his comment. You're nothing more than a clueless, mindless animal. The 5 blades began spinning as he lifted himself up into the air, the metal cord allowing him to fly much higher up and keep his position due to the blades. Growling arf. Arf. Kayasato thought to himself. He had completely lost his trace of humanity. Once his temper got the best of him, he could not longer think, feel, or act human. He was completely at the mercy of his ability. And at the moment it felt like a curse. Scene change, Kakuzu landed to the ground. He was getting frustrated, the fight was taking longer than he would have liked. The clone Kayasato, also known as Tamamaru, landed on his feet at a safe distance away from him. Ya having a good time, mate? He took a defensive stance. You don't look too thrilled to be fightin' right now. Kakuzu tossed his cloak off of him. His body was covered in stitches. What was wrong with him? Was his body like that? Come on then, let's see what you've got in store for me. Your voice is annoying. It matches the way you fight. He arched himself forward as several thick black threads sprouted from his back. After a loud grunt, 2 large black creatures appeared before him. They were unlike anything he had ever seen before. The first one took on the appearance of a demonic-looking tiger. Its body was completely black and its face was a simple white mask. The second stood, or rather floated, as it had wings. It also was completely covered in black with a similar but different appearing white mask. It was very tall and had a thin body compared to the other one next to it. What the bloody hell is this bastard? He desperately thought to himself, keeping his composure on the outside. I don't need to use the fire and wind masks, but it will be much easier in finishing you off, dog. Sasori has an issue with being kept waiting. I don't like it either, so I'll be finishing this quickly. Oh well, aren't you just a ball of fluff looking out for your mate like that? I'm touched, really. I cannot stand the way you talk. You'll be better off in the bounty station once I'm finished here with you and your master. You'll be doing that, will ya? Don't take us leaf shinobi lightly, especially my master and Moself. He replied, getting ready for a much more difficult fight. Shut up. Just shut up and die. He yelled, making a quick combination of hand signs. Fire-style searing migraine. End flashback. Sasori and Kakuzu were still around when I was alive, Kiba said. I see. Are they still alive? Nope. You'll be happy to know my friend Naruto killed Kakuzu and Sakura killed Sasori. He looked surprised but relatively at ease. Minato's son? How about that then? So your mate killed him, huh? I'm impressed, son. She may even be stronger than you. He laughed. Kiba shook his head. She has her moments where honestly, Dad, I think she could be. Just like your mother. A wonderful woman through and through, but never someone I want to be around when they're angry. Yep. That's Sakura for you. He chuckled. Hey Dad, you said you unlocked a Kekii Genkai in our clan? Yes. Kind of, which I didn't. I had no control over myself in that state. Something like that happened to me before I died. When I fought pain, but I wasn't a complete animal. I still had control over my thoughts and actions. I see. He said. It's a rare trait because not a lot of people can control it when they enter it. Your grandfather, my father, was the first one to unlock it in over 50 years. My grandfather? Yeah. The only problem there is that when he unlocked it, it was during the war. When he tapped into it, he was faster and stronger than everyone on the battlefield. Except he didn't know how to turn it off. He became the animal and attacked his own allies after the enemy had been taken out. His father sighed. Another reason why it's so rare is because the elders of our clan seal it away when we are born. Normally it never comes out in our lifetime. But I unlocked it when I fought Sasori, and it seems you unlocked it as well. I had no control in unlocking it though. It just happened. It's normally stress activated. You were protecting Sakura and your ability manifested when you were outnumbered. Yet you said you had control over yourself? Yeah. I could still talk, think everything. I was just really fast and I felt like I had taken a soldier pill because everything was heightened. Remarkable he could control it? His father thought. Usually when that ability is unlocked, we have to kill the user. That's what happened to my father. They almost never return to normal. Well, almost. You okay, Dad? Yeah. Anyway, where was I? Flashback, Sasori pulled out all 4 scrolls and unsealed them all. In a large puff of smoke, an enormous amount of puppets came forth, completely surrounding him. Secret red move performance of 100 puppets. Kayasato kept his footing, growling at the mass of puppets. Such an unfortunate circumstance, I had to use this technique on you. But I will give myself the luxury of finishing this fight early. Arf. Arf arf. Why do I even speak when you cannot respond with anything short of an animal's mindset? He raised both his hands up, flung his hands forward, sending all 100 puppets hurling towards the Inuzuka. This is the end for you. Scene change, can't keep this charade up for long. Have to get in close and knock him back. Tamamaru thought as he dodged a pressure wave generated by the wind mask. He looked to the side to see several trees rooted from their base. Definitely can't get hit by that. He quickly retreated into the forest, concealing himself amidst the trees as he tried to formulate a plan. Right then. Long-range support, and they combine their attacks. That means I have to get them away and hit him before the bastards get back to fry me. Then an idea hit him. He quickly jumped on top of one of the trees and saw Kakuzu with his masks by his side, as if he were waiting for him to show himself. I grow tired of this game, dog. He said. Well, how about you come do some fightin' yourself then? Big strap-in lad like ya could put quite the number on me, you reckon? Kakuzu was getting annoyed rather quickly. This dog took the same form as Kayasato, the man he was trying to collect, but had the voice of his Nin dog, and his accent was really starting to aggravate him. Tamamaru blinked but wished he didn't. The moment his eyes opened, Kakuzu was in mid-swing, merely a few feet away from him. He had just enough time to bring his arm up to block, but Kakuzu countered it by grabbing his would-be blocking arm and smashing his fist into his stomach, sending him flying back several feet into the mess of trees in the forest. I should return to help Sasori, he said, but he looked back to where he knocked Tamamaru away. However, 15 million for the animal is money enough to pursue. I never like leaving my work unfinished. As he descended into the forest, he quickly noticed a shade of green standing out from the natural greenery of the forest. It was the Jonin vest Tamamaru was using while dawning on the appearance of Kayasato. He slowly approached the tree, hardening his fist as he prepared to strike. He turned the corner. Sorry dog, this is the end of the line. He then smashed his fist into the tree, but when he looked closer, all he could see was the vest, nothing else. What the? Fong over Fong. Kakuzu only had enough time to turn and face the spiraling speed heading towards him. With no time to react, he was hit dead on by Tamamaru's single Fong over Fong technique. Moments later he broke free from the jutsu, landing down into his original dog form. The jutsu took up too much chakra to maintain his clone form at the same time. Kakuzu laid on the ground deathly still. The dog approached him and sniffed him. He couldn't hear or smell a heartbeat or a pulse. Can't believe that worked, he thought out loud. He sniffed him one more time to reconfirm with himself he was dead and quickly ran off in the direction of his master's scent. Scene change, Chapter 21-6. The inevitable summer. The battle was nothing short of devastating. Sasori was both impressed and angry that Kayasato was able to destroy all but 3 of his puppets. Even more so that his previously feral-like form was now more domesticated. The fighting had taken a considerable toll on the Inuzuka's chakra, and he could no longer keep his Kekkei Genkai activated, though he insisted in his mind it was better that way. After hearing the sound of several snapping trees, they both turned to the direction of it, assuming it was the battle between Kakuzu and Tamamaru. I see, Sasori thought out loud. Looks like Kakuzu is down. Huh? Kayasato asked. Your companion was victorious. I must say I'm disappointed in my partner. Like I give a damn what you feel, Kayasato replied, tossing a handful of kunai towards him. One of the puppets drew a sword and easily deflected all of them, but Kayasato was gone. Behind? Sasori moved a hand to his rear to guard him, and it was a well-timed defensive maneuver as its sword collided with the kunai Kayasato was aiming to drive into Sasori's back. He retreated back, jumping away to give himself enough space to think before attacking again. Just in the nick of time, Tamamaru appeared on the opposite side of Kayasato, wagging his tail in victory. What took you? He called to his 4-legged friend. Bastard was a tricky one, but they always get gullible when they think they won, he replied. Tamamaru, we need to use it. I ready when you are. The 3 figures stood still. Sasori anticipating their attack and the Inuzukas trying to figure a way through his defense without coming into contact with a possible poison he may carry. If he used it to kill Tsukumo, then he more than likely coated some of his, if not all his weapons, with something similar. It was logical to be this cautious, especially this late in the fight. Let's go, Tamamaru. The 2 quickly ran towards the cable that led to Sasori and jumped up towards him before spinning themselves. Fong over Fong. It was an obviously foiled attempt to attack, since Sasori simply retracted the cable and brought himself closer to the ground, in that instance avoiding the attack completely. I hope that wasn't the grand scheme of your plans, he said. But the 2 kept spinning as their techniques moved in figure 8 patterns over each other, then connected together facing down, forming a gigantic single attack. This is for my sensei and all the lives you've destroyed, yelled Kayasato. Beast human martial arts secret technique Heaven Twin Fong. Sasori looked up at what was heading towards him. A large, violently spinning white tornado. It was such an obvious miss, no wonder they did it. This was what they were doing. The attack connected as Sasori's body was slammed into the ground and essentially drilled several feet into the earth. The cable connecting to the tree yanked the oak right from its roots, as the speed and depth of the attack was too great for it to hold. After the attack finally stopped, the team glanced down at Sasori's body. It was ravaged by the attack. Looks like we got him, Kayasato said, pointing to where his heart was. His heart's gone. We must have hit it when the attack connected. Tamamaru sniffed the air. I'm not smellin' anythin'. Looks like that did it, master. They jumped up and exited from the hole they created. Quite lengthy in depth, well over 30 feet into the ground. Are you all right, boy? He asked. Nothin', a long bath and my favorite squeaker won't fix, he replied, wagging his tail. He then perked his ears up. What are we going to tell the Hokage? I don't know. We'll have to send word we defeated the 2 Akatsuki members, then we'll probably be tried for defecting, which won't be fun, but I think when we explain everything we'll be alright. You make it sound like a simple jig in the park, Kyo. We need something to tell them. Tell them mission failed. Before they could fully turn around, they saw Kakuzu holding his hands together. His 2 masks were right beside him and his body was showing signs of exhaustion, being hunched over, but not enough to keep him from attacking one more time. You're both more trouble than you're worth. Especially that mutt. He quickly held his hands tight as he called out his attack. Fire-style searing migraine. The demonic-looking tiger opened its mouth as a large wave of fire escaped its mouth and rushed specifically for Tomamoru. At this point Kakuzu was willing to put aside the money for the dog. He was furious the animal was able to cause so much damage to him, it was embarrassing. No! Kayasato yelled as he shoved Tomamoru out of the path of the fire. The dog got his footing but could only watch as the fire was brought to a halt by his master's hands. You daft fool! You can't hold that. I know, he said as the burns began to fester across his hands and spread up his arms. I made it my own objective to stop people like this. For my wife, my daughter, my son, for you and everyone of the village. He turned to the left to face his faithful friend who was staring at him horrified. You're a good dog, Tomamoru. I couldn't have asked for anyone better. As his smile made its way to his face, the firestorm eventually overwhelmed him, completely flying through his body as the jutsu took him. Kayasato! He yelled, but his friend was gone. His tail fell under his legs as his body slowly let itself touch the ground. I couldn't do anything. I had to be the one who got rescued and I couldn't help him. Why was it him? Scene change, as the fire carried him away. Kayasato could feel his skin frying. Red, then black, then chipping into ash. So this is really it? Hey, my kids, I'll never see them become true ninjas. I bet Tsume's still pretty mad at me. Flash forward, /n. Remember how I did the multiple set of flashbacks with Kiba? I'm doing a multiple set of forwards with his dad. Same rule applies. His name is Akamaru, she said. And from now on you'll be looking after him. Kiba turned back to face Akamaru, kneeling down to get closer to eye level with him. He stuck his hand out to see what Akamaru would do. After the puppy licked his hand, he giggled at the affection and picked Akamaru up, who wasn't barking much anymore, simply wagging his tail. I'm Kiba. Nice to meet you, Akamaru. Arf. Scene change, what do you think it will be? He asked. She shrugged her shoulders. I don't know. But we'll love him or her no matter what, won't we? He looked back up at her, keeping his hand on her stomach. Yeah, we will. Scene change, if you will not speak then I shall pass judgment. He loomed over her, pulling his arm back, aiming directly at her chest. No pain. He thrusted his blade down to her chest. Sakura closed her eyes, fearing the end. She never found Kiba, the baby would never be born, she would never get to build her home and family the way she dreamed. It was all coming to an end with a single stab. Clank, she opened her eyes. The blade was gone. It wasn't near her. When she fully opened them, she saw an all too familiar figure in black standing in front of her. His kunai was drawn, holding the disruptor blade in its place, not budging in the slightest. Painhe, what an interesting name. Kiba? He turned his head to see her. His tears had since dried but carried the stains of Shino's blood on his face and on various parts of his jacket. The one and only. End flash forward, yes, I see it now. I see you, Kiba, and I see the man you will become. His blackened lips cracked as he made a weak smile, the skin flaking away as it continued to melt off of him. So proud. Kiba! He yelled with the last of his strength as the fire carried him away, his voice quietly echoing through the forest. Scene change, just now remembering, he turned his face to Kakuzu, his face showing his teeth as his tail came back up and stiffened. You bastard! He barked as he quickly ran towards him. I'll bite ya fucking throat out for what you've done, you son of a bitch. No, you won't. Kakuzu calmly stated as he commanded his wind mask to attack. Wind-style pressure damage. The sharp gust of wind smacked Tomamoru right in his face as he was brought to a halt. The German Shepherd tried to keep its footing, but the gusts were too powerful. The wind picked him up and held him in place. Seems I won't be collecting anything today, Kakuzu said. But I will have 2 more names to cross off of my bingo book. If you don't kill me, he snarled at him. I swear to you I'll find you. Even if you do kill me, I'll guide the souls of every leaf shinobi until they stop you and this accursed organization you associate yourself with, you gutless fuck. An interesting theory, dog. He brought one of his hands back in an open palm. But there will be no justice today. Not for you. Not for your master. And certainly not for me. He threw his palm forward as the gale force violently tossed Tamamaru away into the horizon. A long howl could be heard as it echoed during its travel until the dog was out of sight completely. You can stop playing now, Kakuzu said. They're gone. Among the pile of the 3 puppets still left in Sasori's arsenal, one began to move. In a maroon cloak, the figure stood up only to reveal Sasori himself. I did not like the time it took to finish this fight, Sasori said. Luckily, before the attack struck him earlier, he shot his heart into one of the spare puppets laying about. Had he taken the full blow of that attack, that would have been it for him. The pressure of the wind would have been too powerful for his heart to function. Nor did I, Kakuzu replied. Let's go. He turned and began walking the opposite direction of where the fight was. Sasori turned back to see the still smoldering path of flames that Kakuzu left. It traveled for miles. He would have been a powerful addition, he said. Scene change. Several miles away from the fight, Kayasato's corpse laid charred and blackened from the intense heat but was still giving off a faint chakra sign. The ninja that had been following him recently finally caught up to him and landed to his side. He fell into a deep despair when he finally confirmed it was him. Kayasato, no, I'm too late, he said to himself. 2 more ninjas jumped down and stood beside him. One stepped forward, placing his hand on the griever's back. Hayashi, I'm sorry. Hayashi turned his head slightly. Why couldn't I have seen this happen? Why couldn't I stop him? Shibi. The ninja comforting Hayashi said. Check that chakra signature close by. On it, he said, heading off. Hayashi fell to his knees. The sight of his teammate scarred him extensively. He could barely tell it was him. It was completely mutilated, almost as if he was burned alive. Minato, was this Sasori? He shook his head. No. Sasori uses puppets and poisons. He had to have had a partner. Someone with a fire-style jutsu. I see, he said. The Akatsuki keeps growing. The Hokage nodded. This is an example of what they can do. Kayasato was one of our best ninja. He knelt down beside the Hyuga. The new generation, the one our children will be brought into, we must push harder than we were. If we're going to stop things like this to happen. He nodded in agreement. Yes. You're right. He thought to himself then. I will push my daughter harder than every other ninja in this village. One day Hinata will thank me. I found Tamamaru. Both turned around to see Shibi holding the body of Tamamaru in his arms. The dog was covered in blood, dust and dirt. His left hind leg was missing and assumed it was broken off during the fight with the Akatsuki. Byakugan. Hayashi carefully examined Tamamaru. It was faint, but he was still alive. He's still alive, barely. He stood up. We need to get him back to the village at once. He probably knows about the attack. What about Kayasato? Shibi asked. What are we going to tell his family and the rest of the elders? Minato stood up. There's too much going on to raise more panic. We have to keep tension as low as we can. Hayashi looked shocked at his response. You're not saying? We have to, he said. For the sake of the village, we will need to inform the elders that Kayasato Inuzuka's body was never recovered and that he is still missing in action. The dog could always spill it, Shibi pointed out. Minato shook his head. No. I have a feeling he would agree with this. He knows that family better than everyone. He knows how devastating this could be if it got out. But we can't just send the dog back to the family with no master. Hayashi said. Let me take him. Hayashi Minato, I have the best chances of keeping him hidden and the fate of his father a secret. The Hyuga compound is nowhere near Inuzuka. When the time is right, I will bring him out. I'm the head of the main house in my clan. We know a thing or two about keeping secrets. The Kage nodded. Very well. As soon as we get back to the village, we'll bring the dog to your quarters and have the vets take a look at him. Hayashi and Minato jumped away, heading back to the village. Shibi glanced at him one last time, though it still looked no closer than what he used to look like. You deserved better than this, old friend. End flashback. Kiba was speechless. He couldn't say anything even if he wanted to. They were sitting back at the docks again. And that's how I got here, you could say. Dad. Silence filled the conversation for several minutes. This entire time it made sense now. All of it did. I want to be mad at the Hokage, but I can't. Kiba said, breaking the silence. It may have been wrong, but it was the right thing to do at the moment. His father nodded. But I finally get it. I get all of it now, Dad. What's that? All this time Mom told me you ran away. But I know what she meant now. He stood up. You didn't run away, you ran towards. You saw the wrong and you chased after it. You weren't afraid. His father then stood up as well. Kiba looked up at him. I'm proud of you, Dad. I don't think I could have asked for a better father, no matter how little you were in my life. He smiled as he hugged his father. Kiba, his father, smiled, hugging him back. I'm so happy to hear you say that. I feared for too long you and your sister would hate me for what I did. No. We don't. And I know now that Mom doesn't. I don't think she ever did. The silence was eventually broken by a long green stream of chakra. It latched onto Kiba's back as the chakra completely engulfed him. What the? Dad? His father smiled as he stepped back a little bit. Looks like you're not done yet, son. Not done? I'm coming back to life? How? He smiled again. Reanimation jutsu. Kiba banged his fist against the barrier. Dad. His father smiled at him. He walked up to the barrier and placed his hand on it where his son's fist was. Kiba, I'm so happy I was able to see you become a man. Thank you for forgiving me. A small stream of tears fell down Kiba's face. He didn't want to stay dead, but he didn't want to be away from his father again. Dad, I tell your mother and sister I love them. And I love you, son. Dad. And just like that, the barrier carrying Kiba was lifted up and left the realm of the dead. Kayasato turned back to face the fortress in the distance. Slowly he heard a bridge being lifted. As it was a large bridge connecting the dock to the distant building, easily miles in length. Now I can move on, he said out loud. He took a step onto the newly placed bridge and turned back. The edge of the dock was a place he would never forget, where he met his son. A place where he spent countless years waiting for forgiveness was now a thing of the past. He turned and faced the distant fortress again with a smile on his face. Tsukumo-sensei. I will see you soon, he thought, and began his journey to his final resting place. Scene change, Chapter 21-7. The crimson sunset. He gasped for air, immediately shutting his eyes at the brightness of the sun in his face. The gasp of air made him cough as he heavily coughed several times. He finally opened his eyes and saw his hands, his real hands, for the first time in what felt like forever. Am I alive? He examined his surroundings carefully. He was in the same spot he had died in. He checked his clothes. Ripped and torn, but no wounds. He felt fine. Looking back up, he was greeted by an all-too-familiar bundle of white fur and a fast-moving tail. Akamaru? Arf, said the dog as he tackled his master, furiously licking his face in joy of his return. Akamaru, stop. Stop. He laughed but couldn't bring himself to make him stop. Finally he did, and Kiba was able to get his bearings as he stood up. Where is everyone? His question was soon answered as he heard a thunderous cheer and applause coming not too far away from him. What the hell is that? He tried stepping, but his legs were too stiff for being dead so long. Come on, boy, we gotta see what all the commotion is. Arf. Scene change. The Chunin and his dog made their way to a large crowd of people. In front of them was Naruto and Kakashi. After putting two and two together, Kiba figured Naruto was the one who probably saved everyone. Maybe he even brought him back to life. But how? He didn't know reanimation jutsu, did he? Slowly approaching the crowd, the familiar faces of his friends began appearing to him. Two familiar ones being Shino and Hinata. When he looked closer, he saw Hinata holding on to Shino's arm. Shino kept his sunglasses on but had taken the liberty of keeping his long jackets off. He smiled at the sight. It was happy to see that so much had happened since he came back. But how much time had really passed? It felt like years had gone by to him, but the village looked the same and everyone seemed to be the same age. Was he really gone for just a short time? Man Kiba. Shino said. What happened to you? Kiba laughed. Shino, is this real? We're not all dead? He shook his head. You must have hit your head when you woke up. We're plenty alive, and Shino was roughly shoved aside as a certain pink-haired kunoichi heard the name that gave her chills and came to investigate. Kiba got off Akamaru and stiffly stepped towards her, stopping after a few feet. Sakura tears were pounding the ground below her as she stared at him. He was dead. She saw him get stabbed, cut, and essentially die in front of her. And there he was, alive and standing 5 feet away from her. Kiba! She shouted as she ran into his chest, hugging him tightly. Maybe a little too tightly as Kiba struggled to break free. Sakura, Sakura, I can't breathe, Sakura. He gasped. She loosened her grip but kept her face buried into his neck. He held her closely as he returned the embrace. Crowds of people were each celebrating the return and victory of Naruto against pain, and few paid mind to what was going on between them. Is this real? He asked. I was dead. I saw my dad. I talked to him. Yes. She sniffed. This is real. You're alive again. Naruto beat pain. He smiled. Naruto beat pain, huh? I knew he would. The kid has more guts than anyone I know. But Sakura. He started. How long was I dead? It felt like I was gone for years. I thought that you grew up, our son grew up, and I thought you would have found someone else. She looked at him and deeply kissed him, something she had been meaning to do since the moment she saw him. I could never ever love someone like I love you. I'll never let go. He ran his hands up her cheeks, through her hair. Sakura, scene change, and so the village hidden in the leaves rebuilt itself. It was a long process but nowhere near impossible. The Rookie 11 all celebrated Naruto's victory over pain, and the Jinchuriki finally got what he had always wanted: respect. With nothing but time on their hands, Kiba and Sakura finally decided on a place to live together. A small home roughly 5 miles from his mother's house, ample size for starting a family. And as the months drew on, Sakura began growing more and more fond of the idea of being a mother. Scene change, finally the 9th month rolled around. Ironically, Sakura was on her way to visit the doctor to see how well the baby was coming along. When her water broke, one of the villagers called the doctors to come bring her in. Kiba was immediately notified and went home early from his training with Guy to make sure she was all right. He ran to the front desk as quickly as he could with Akamaru close behind. Yes, sir, can I help you? He gasped for air. My girlfriend. She's pregnant. Having a baby. Need to find her. Pink hair. Ah, yes. You just missed her. She should be on her way up to the 3rd floor, she said, but Kiba was already on his way to the elevator with his friend behind him. Yes, have a nice day, she sarcastically said. As soon as he reached the elevator, he pounded on the up arrow key. A second later again, until he began pressing it over and over. He was afraid he was going to break it. Bing! He looked at the elevator to his left and ran in, immediately hitting the 3rd floor button. The door closed slowly and the elevator made its way up. As soon as it stopped, he forced himself through the door, accidentally crashing into a doctor with a patient. Shit. I'm so sorry. He helped the patient to their feet. Gotta go. I'm having a baby. As soon as he ran off, the patient stared at the doctor, who simply shrugged his shoulders. He's having a baby? Apparently. Scene change, we can't use pain meds, she's already dilated. Since Tsunade was taking watch over the hospital on her day off, she was there when Sakura came in after her water broke. Because of that she was helping deliver the baby. Of course, by helping she was doing the entire procedure, as many of the nurses were terrified of her apprentice punching one of them through the entire hospital. Where is he? Ugh. Where is he? Sakura, you need to relax. If you keep thinking about Kiba and not this baby, you won't be able to deliver it properly. Now I need you to Sakura. Kiba quickly ran into the room and took to her side, grabbing her hand. He immediately regretted this decision as she gripped it so hard it went through a series of color changing. I'm sorry, Sakura. I got here as soon as I could. You better be. I'm not having this baby without you, furball. He smiled at her, almost forgetting the pain he was in. He didn't mind it, he just wished it would stop soon. He didn't like the idea of having a purple hand. Sakura. Tsunade called to her. I can see the head, you need to give one more push. If you can do it in one more go, we'll have it. Do it. Kiba said to her. I know you can do this. We've overcome bigger things than we? I'm having the fucking baby here. Yeah, you're right. She calmly took in a deep breath as she finally gave in one final push. With the rest of her strength, she finally felt the mass leave her body. Her eyes were closed from the amount of pain it brought her, but a rush of relief came over her as she heard the loud cries of a baby fill the room. Tsunade took the correct steps, cutting the umbilical cord and gently cleaning the baby off with a soft cloth. Sakura. She said, handing her the baby. It's a boy. Her eyes filled with delight as she took her son into his arms. Kiba took his now free and recovering hand and wrapped it around her. He's gorgeous. She said. Of course he is. He said. When he has someone like you for his mother. Kiba. Tsunade said. We'll be keeping her for the week for observation to make sure she and the baby are recovering fine. If you want, I can arrange to have a cot made here for you if you wish to stay. He nodded. That would be great, Lady Tsunade. Thank you. She nodded as she and the rest of the staff left the room. It was already dark outside. Kiba walked over to the other side of the bed and sat in the chair next to it. The baby had since fallen asleep. Sakura kept him held in tight. She's never looked happier. Here they were 16 years old and holding their first child. And strangely it felt right. Nothing about this situation felt wrong in any sort of way. Do you want to hold him? She asked. Yeah. He smiled. She happily handed him over as Kiba scooped his son up into his arms. He was quiet and completely peaceful. The sight alone made all his fatigue and aches feel like nothing. Was this what it meant to really be happy? He took his son and walked to the large window facing the newly lit night sky. Another clear night facing the monument of the Hokage's faces. We aren't very good parents. She said. We never picked a name for him. He chuckled. No, we didn't. He said, looking down at his tiny son. When he looked back up, not more than 20 feet away on another roof stood his father. His appearance did not differ from when he last saw him. Full leaf shinobi attire and his arms crossed. He glanced into the widow from the distance, smiling at him. Dad, thank you. I think I know what I want to name him. He said, looking down at his son. What's that? She asked. He glanced back outside to his father standing on the room. His father waved as he turned around and walked off, fading away as he did so, returning back to his dimension. Kayasato. Kayasato Inuzuka. Sakura smiled at the name. I love it. Yeah. He smiled outside where his father's spirit stood but was now vacated. Me too. Chapter 22. Today was another standard checkup followed with a few hours of physical therapy. Sakura assured Kiba he didn't have to stay with her today and he could come back later. He was reluctant, but he complied and spent his day wandering around with Akamaru with no real purpose or destination. Guess we'll just relax at home for a little bit. He thought out loud. Arf. Akamaru agreed. Finally making their way home, barely stepping away from the door and entering the living room, there was a knock at the door. He turned and looked out the peephole. His eyes opened as he quickly unlocked the door and opened it. Lord Hayashi? Hello, Kiba. Akamaru. Kiba bowed. Please come in. Closing the door behind the Hyuga, he escorted him to the living room as the elder sat down on the couch. Can I get you anything to drink, sir? I'm fine, thank you. He placed a small vase on the coffee table in front of him with a small bundle of daisies. This is from Hinata, Niji, and myself. As congratulations for your son. Kiba sat down in the recliner across from the coffee table. He picked the vase up and took it to the window close by them. Thank you. I know she'll like this. Kiba, I don't normally make house calls. There was something I wanted to ask you. Yeah. He said, sitting back down, giving him his full attention. Hinata tells me you died during the invasion 6 months ago. He nodded. That's right. I did. Do you remember anything in particular? Perhaps meeting someone important? Kiba smiled. Well, I did find out my father looks exactly like me, just taller and with a ponytail. I see. So you did meet your father. He couldn't move on. After I forgave him, though I think he did. Indeed. He crossed his arms. Kiba. Did he by any chance mention his past? Old teammates, companions, even how he died? Check and check. He said. I know Hinata, Shino, and myself are a next generation of you guys like Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji. Hayashi gave a rare smile. Then I can show you. Show me? He asked. Not another shogi game, please. He thought, please come with me back to the Hyuga residence. There's something I told myself I'd show you, or rather your family, when you were old enough. He was confused, but he complied. He and Akamaru stood up and left their home with the Hyuga head. Scene change. After a long and quiet walk, they finally made their way back to the compound. Strangely, it was empty where there was usually training. Then he realized it was normally Hayashi and Niji who used those personal training quarters. Where's Niji and Hinata? Hinata is on a mission right now, said Hayashi as they ventured into the compound. Niji is probably tied up at the moment. Scene change. Look, your food is right here, said Niji. I know what food is. You gone daft, boy? I can't see well, and I lost a leg don't mean I can't smell. Ugh. He shoved the bowl in his face. I don't know why you insist on being so difficult, but my uncle is not here right now. Now eat. And what are you going to do if I don't, Twiggy? How do I know you're not some spy sent by Kakuzu to finish the job? Damn fool couldn't kill me, then had to wait till I was an old bastard to finish the job. Kakuzu's dead. Naruto killed him, not that you would know who he is. I saw the Hokage's boy killed him, did he? I guess Minato's good genes rubbed off on the boy after all. Hokage's boy? Niji asked, confused. Oops. Shouldn't have opened my big mouth. Never mind that, Twiggy. Stop calling me Twiggy, Niji said, frustrated. Just eat your food, Tamamaru. Hayashi isn't here to feed you like I know that, daft Twiggy. Stop calling me that. Oh dear, seems I hit Twiggy's soft spot, chuckled Tamamaru. His ears perked as he could hear the sound of footsteps. 1 pair, 2, 4 pairs? No. Those patterns, one is Hayashi, I know that sound all too well. The other, the 4 feet, it's a dog, right? But that smell, there's no way it could be? Finally the door opened. Hayashi stood with Kiba and Akamaru to his side as he examined the failed attempt at feeding the dog. Kiba's eyes opened widely. It was a large full-sized German Shepherd laying down on a large dog bed. His eyes were lighter than the average color would suggest, implying he was losing his sight. His left hind leg was gone and replaced by a wooden peg. Gray strands of fur were common around his face, suggesting his age was quite seasoned. Tamamaru, I've told you before, Niji is not a spy. You can trust him. Yuri too soft now, Hayashi. What if Twiggy here were to pull a fast one on us and he really is an Akatsuki spy? Niji huffed as he walked towards the door, leaving the bowl on the ground. I'm not sure how your father's companion managed to get along with anyone but him Kiba, but frankly he's incredibly aggravating. Kiba's mouth dropped. And my father's? Kiba? That you boy? Tamamaru asked, looking to his general direction but not in the exact location, with his tail slowly wagging back and forth left to right. His accent never faded, still keeping its thickness even in his old age. Hayashi nodded at him to go in. Tamamaru. I prepared the food myself, it's safe, don't worry. Alright Hayashi, if you think Twiggy here isn't going to finish the job poor Akatsuki couldn't do, then I'll listen to ya. Kiba slowly approached the old canine and sat down next to the bed. Akamaru laid down next to him as he sniffed the other dog's scent from the distance. You're Tamamaru? The dog wagged his tail as he forced himself to sit up. His vision may have gone bad, but he could still see at close range how much he looked like his former master. You look just like him. No mistake in it. Slap on a bit more hair and a good-looking pup like Mosself and it'll be just like old times. Arf. Tamamaru sniffed closely at Akamaru. You grew quite a bit as well, you have. You look just like your father, as I remember. You knew Akamaru's father too? I did. Quite a bit more of us in Izuka's back then. The litter was much bigger, much stronger back in my day. I knew Akamaru's father for a short while. Good dog. Shame we lost him in the war. I'm sorry. Kiba said. But Hayashi brought me here, he wanted to show me something. Did he mean you? Could be. He sniffed Kiba a bit more. He was assured now he wasn't a spy. The dog's paranoia grew every day since he was recovered from his fight against Kakuzu, thinking anyone besides Hayashi was an Akatsuki spy sent to finish the job. You have an odd smell about you, pup. He said. Kiba seemed confused. He couldn't smell anything peculiar about himself, and Akamaru seemed confused as well. Death. The old dog said. The scent is faint, but I can smell it. It made sense now. I died when the village was attacked 6 months ago. Did ya? Well, that makes sense then, but how'd ya come back from that? I don't know. Apparently everyone who was killed in the invasion was revived also. I see Tamamaru, I saw my dad. His ears perked up. You saw Kayasato, did ya? Kiba nodded. He couldn't move on. After I met him and he told me everything that happened, I forgave him and he was able to move on. Tamamaru looked down at the blurry ground with his eyes. I see. Aikyo, you left quite a mark on this one, you have. So much like you. I think that's why Hayashi brought me to you. It is, said another voice. Kiba quickly shot his head to the right to see an open door. In the doorway stood his mother with Kuramaru right by her side. Her look of shock was sincere and something Kiba had never seen his mother do before. Tsume, said Tamamaru, struggling to stand, his stance unbalanced due to his peg leg being slightly shorter than his other legs. It's been a long time, love. He looked to Kuramaru. You sure seen your fair share of action, haven't you, old man? Kuramaru grunted. Least I can still see. Least I have both my eyes, you old sack. What's that you got under your patch? Got a present for me, do ya? He retaliated. Kuramaru shook his head as Tsume walked over and sat next to her son. There was no mistaking it. Even after 16 years she could still smell her long-gone husband on him. Tamamaru, she said in a more frail and gentle voice. Kiba couldn't believe this was his mother speaking. Was this matter taking that much of a toll on him? Then again, when he thought about it, he was sure it would be the same thing if Sakura was in her position and the situation was based on them. I thought you were dead. We all did. I would have been had Shibi not found me. I was barely kickin' to begin with. Kayasato was not as lucky. What? She looked confused. But he ran away. He defected. Are you saying that's why we kept this hidden? I was barely alive when it happened, but I overheard the decision. The rest of my master's team and the 4th Hokage found me not far from Kayasato. A member of the Akatsuki named Kakuzu killed him. He died trying to save me. Her face was devastated. Kiba didn't know what to say. He had already heard this, but his mother was completely new to this. "Mom?" he asked. "I see," she said. Kuramaru interjected. A 16-year-old lie brought to surface. He looked at Tamamaru in thought. "Why now? Memory failed ya already, old man? We were still at War, mate. The last thing we needed to do was raise panic in the village. We had a couple of goons in black cloaks coming after our higher-ups. I may not have liked it at the time, but it was the right decision in the long run. TCH, blind old fool's tongue is still as sharp as ever. He'll probably take it to the grave with him." Kuramaru thought as he looked back at his master, who was still in a hard-to-decipher composure. "Where's little Hannah then? Thought the whole family was coming?" asked the old dog. "She couldn't get away. She's a vet now," Tsume said with a small hint of happiness behind it, remembering the conversation they all had all those years ago about it. She did now? Beautiful. World needs more people like her taking care of animal and people. Maybe she can fix old man's little present under his patch." "You want to lose another leg?" Kuramaru snapped. As if you could. I have 3 legs and could still do circles around you, ya old bastard." "Come on, you two," said Kiba. "I know you guys were rivals at one point, but can we please get back to this?" A right. "Tsume?" She nodded. "Tamamaru, where is Kayasato's body now?" "Scattered, I imagine. His body was torched by a fire jutsu Kakuzu used, so when Hayashi and Shibi went back the next day it was gone. I imagine the wind carried the remains of it off." "Makes sense." She thought, keeping her face as stern as she could. "Is that why we're here?" The dog nodded, laying down due to the exhaustion from standing and sitting up for so long. "I was there with Kayasato when you two had your disagreement, we'll call it, yeah. I knew the immediate news would devastate you and the family. When they explained it to me, I didn't go quiet at first, honest, but in time it made sense. Now that you're all older and more mature, Hayashi thought it was for the best to finally reveal what really happened." "I already know," said Kiba. "What?" His mother glanced at him. "How, Kiba?" "It's a long story, but basically what happened was, scene change, therapy was long and boring and honestly not needed since Sakura was using her chakra to heal herself ever since she woke up the night after she had the baby. She could even walk on her own without any assistance, but Tsunade insisted she went with standard procedure. She sat in her bed going through the food the nurses had brought her. Not much to choose from, but it was food at least. She wanted to hold her son again, she missed him so much. She knew he was only 1 floor down and being taken care of, but she still missed him. Hard to believe that small thing was taking up so much of her attention. Wait, what was she thinking? Of course it was. It was her son, her and Kiba, they made him together. Sure, she had to carry him, restrict her eating habits, confess to her parents about the baby, and get the talk from her mother, but in the end the decision to stay with him was one of the best choices she's ever made. There was a knock at the door. "Come in." In came Shizune, holding the baby Kayasato in her arms as she approached her bed. "I think he's spent a little too much time away from his mother." She smiled as she took her son into her arms and held him. He was fast asleep with a small bubble of saliva escape his mouth. She giggled as she wiped it off of him. "No birthmarks yet." Tsume told her they normally don't manifest until they're around 6 months, so she was excited to see it. Already she could tell, despite being almost a week old, how much he resembled his father. His hair was a medium color brown and his eyes held the same color as Kiba. There was no mistake, they would be nearly identical as her son grew up. "Another Kiba, I don't know if I could handle that," she said out loud. "Speaking of that, where is he?" asked Shizune. "He should be on his way back now. He knows I'm off of therapy by now." "Oh, I'm sure he's on the way," she replied. "Anyway, I wanted to bring him up here so you could see him. The nurses will be back to take him back downstairs in a few hours." "Where are you going?" Sakura asked. "Oh, you know, something came up," she cheerfully said before waving goodbye and leaving the room with a cracked door. That's weird, she usually stays for longer than that, she thought. Scene change, Mom? The two Inuzukas and their companions were exiting the Hyuga compound. Their meeting with Tamamaru proved enlightening to his mother but seemed to be a repeat but a reassuring confirmation for him on his father's story. Not that he would suggest his father lied, but it was nice to know they were all on the same page. His mother just kept walking. She wasn't ignoring him, but how could she be so oblivious to what had happened? Her son died. Her husband's murder was kept a secret from her for over 15 years, and all this time his mean dog had been crashing at the Hyuga residence right under her nose. What kind of mother am I? She said, finally stopping in the middle of the street they were walking in. Kiba walked around her and hugged her. You're my mother. And it doesn't matter about what happened to me, to Dad or anyone else. I'm still here. He looked up at his mom, who was looking back down at him. And Dad was able to move on. He was suffering for 16 years, and I can tell you from experience a few hours in the real world felt like years in there. But now he's finally at peace, Mom, and he loves you. He always will. You know he does. He even told me himself. She was shocked he had said all that, but it was what she needed to hear. She hugged her son back, ruffling the top of his head. Thank you, son. She said. Anytime, Mom. He hugged her back before letting go. I'm gonna head off to see Sakura. She's out of therapy right now. Why don't you come by the house next week when she's home? That would be nice, since I haven't seen my grandson yet. She took a step away from him, forgetting to ask him something very important. What did you name him? Kiba smiled. Kayasato. Her back was turned to him, but her smile and happiness was unescapable from Kiba's nose. Just the name by itself, and knowing his name would be passed on to the new generation, it gave her a new sense of hope. That his father would somehow continue to live on in her grandchild even though he would never meet him. I'll see you soon, Kiba. She said before her, and Kuramaru puffed away. He knew she wasn't mad. He looked over at Akamaru, who was wagging his tail. It was an accomplishing day for everyone today. And now it was time to finish it off by spending time with his newly founded family. Scene change. It was the best the three could do on such short notice, and to be so discreet meant they couldn't buy anything too fancy that would give it away. But Kakashi knew his sensei would have liked the small memorial his old team had made for him. Flashback. The sun was setting on the three young Chunin. Kakashi, Obito, and Rin all stood under a large oak, glancing down at the memorial they had made for their sensei. It was a small bouquet of yellow roses and a picture frame containing all of them. In the middle of the picture was Tamamaru with Obito riding on top of his back with his goggles on, his left hand holding onto his fur while his right hand was waving to the camera. Rin was to the left with her hands behind her back and a simple smile on her face. Kakashi had an expressionless face on due to his mask as he stared into the camera when it took its shot. Kayasato stood to the right of Kakashi, his right hand on his shoulder with a side smile on his face. It was their first and only picture taken together as the short-lived Team Kayasato before Minato took leadership of the team. This was the only thing they could recover, said Kakashi. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ripped and dented leaf headband. Black thread, clearly damaged from heat, weather, and prolonged usage. He folded the thread to the back of the metal and laid the headband in front of the team picture. But that just means he left it, right? He's still missing in action, isn't he? Obito asked, sniffing as he wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Obito. Rin touched his shoulder. It's been months and all they could find was that. They haven't even seen Tamamaru. We have to accept that he's gone. No. He quickly snapped back, stepping back away from his teammates. How can you just give up like this? Rin took a step towards him. Obito, why are we making this memorial? Why are we marking a grave with no body to place it in? He's still out there. He has to be. He wiped his eyes to dry the tears coming from his face. Kayasato-sensei was a hero. He saw the dangers that even the Hokage couldn't see. He broke the law to try and protect us. Isn't that what being a shinobi is all about? Fighting evil? Fighting hate? That's what he's doing right now. That's why he's not back yet. Obito Rin said defeated. Flashback within a flashback. Obito was walking home with a slight limp. He had pushed himself too hard during his training today. The force of his jutsu was too powerful for him to control and it sent him flying. Of course, since he continued to practice until he could get it right, he kept throwing himself back. The fireball jutsu was correct and powerful enough, but he wasn't keeping his weight in his legs like he was supposed to, thus resulting in his comical flybacks. You overdid it again, Obito. The Uchiha turned around to see Kayasato standing there with a stick of dango in his hand, the other missing a dumpling already. Sensei? Scene change, they had finally entered the Uchiha area. Kayasato had since finished his dango, but Obito was still finishing his. It was an ironic sight since the Uchiha could shovel down bowls of ramen in mere seconds, but with a small item such as dango he had taken his time. I can do the jutsu, sensei. But I can't keep my weight in my feet. I don't know why. You focus too much on creating a large blast of fire that you forget you need to keep your footing, or you'll either lose the jutsu or you'll lose control of it and you could potentially hurt everybody in the process. I don't want to be dead weight, sensei. Kayasato stopped as he noticed Obito staring at the ground, stopping himself. Obito? It's true, isn't it? I'm an Uchiha, the clan of elites. But every mission we go on I'm always the one getting saved. I tried to help Rin last time and Kakashi got there before me. He always gets there before me. He stood in front of the young Uchiha and put his hands on his shoulders. Obito. You're so young. You still have a long ways to go before you can call yourself dead weight. Think about it like this: you haven't even awakened your Sharingan yet. And Kakashi was the son of my sensei, the White Fan of the Leaf. You're just at a disadvantage. But that just means you should work harder. Obito looked up at his sensei with a small smile on his face. Do you really think I could become that much better if I awakened my Sharingan? Absolutely. He said. From now on, whenever Kakashi puts you down, you tell him this: I am Obito Uchiha and I will surpass you once I awaken my Sharingan. His young face lit up at his sensei's seemingly brilliant words. He looked up to the sky as he repeated what he had told him to say, pointing to the sky. I am Obito Uchiha and Kakashi Hatake, I will surpass you once I awaken my Sharingan. End flashback within a flashback. He wouldn't just die like this. Not Kayasato-sensei. He'll come back, I know he will. Obito. Kakashi said, finally breaking the silence, staring at the picture still. He was kneeling on his left knee, keeping his right leg on its foot. If you keep complaining about Kayasato-sensei's disappearance and don't train, you'll disappoint him when he comes back. He turned to Obito and closed his eyes, symbolizing he was smiling under his mask. Obito just stared at him. It was something different and unexpected. Yeah, you're right, Kakashi. The three temporarily sensei-less Chunin glanced at the memorial together one more time before turning and leaving. End flashback. He broke his concentration when he heard a small rustling of leaves behind him. I must be losing my touch. I only just now heard you. The figure behind him said nothing as it approached Kakashi, still in the same stance he was when he visited the memorial at first 16 years ago. Finally behind him it kneeled down on both knees and wrapped its arms around his neck, bringing its face next to his. Kakashi turned to the face. Normally I'm the only one who really knows where this place is and I like to keep it that way. But you'll make an exception for me just this once, right? Said Shizune. She kept her backward embrace on him as Kakashi dipped his head down in thought. Yeah. He looked at the picture of his team again. I think I can do that. Chapter 23. It was good to be up and about in the village. At least for Sakura it was. 1 year had passed since the birth of Kayasato and the family was taking a routine trip to the grocery store. Well, routine for Sakura perhaps. Bread check. She said as she tossed a full load behind her. It was a dangerous game, shopping with Kiba's girlfriend. Kiba had been a jonin for roughly a year at this point, been together for almost 2 years with Sakura, and had even completed an S-rank mission by this time. But nothing he had trained for could prepare him for an annoyingly boring amount of time he would spend in the grocery store, held against his will by the only woman that could match the fierceness of his mother. Wait. I wasn't ready. Panicked Kiba. He had been carrying two filled brown paper bag by himself. To help optimize their trip, as his lovely mate liked to put it, she had Akamaru carry what appeared to be a saddle with no actual seat on it. Instead, to the sides of him were two large pouches that could carry groceries. And that's exactly what they did, as the pouches sagged to the ground with every passing moment. They were strong, but this was just pushing it. With no free arms or paws to grab the now falling loaf of bread, Kiba took the desperate measure and attempted to bite the plastic to hold it, but epically failed as his teeth clanked together and the bread fell to the floor. No. The bread. Kiba and Akamaru both stood with eyes wide in shock before slowly turning their heads up. Sakura was facing them with her arms crossed, eyes closed, and a twitching eyebrow. She knelt down and picked up the bread, placing it in the completely empty cart she was pushing. Kayasato cackled as she lifted the bread over him and into the basket. He glanced over at his terrified father and practical uncle and continued his high-pitched squeals of joy. Glad you think it's funny, buddy. Spat Kiba. Of course he does. Sakura looked over to her son. Doesn't he? Daddy sure looks silly, doesn't he? Kayasato laughed again but suddenly stopped and began crying. What's wrong? She said, lifting him up. Damn it, can't cover nose. Kiba thought. Sakura. He needs to be changed. Oh really? She said, not turning around and holding her son up still. And I suppose you two are too tied up to change it? She finally turned around to see the position they were on. Kiba's arms were shaking from the duration of time he had been holding the weight, and Akamaru barely keeping his footing from carrying the weight on his back. Well, if we weren't buying the whole store, I could probably put the bags down and do it. But I'm afraid if I do, we'll have to call the fire department to lift the bag up from all the weight we've been carrying around. Who do you think eats all this food anyway? I eat maybe a tenth of this food at best. She set Kayasato into the seat of the cart before getting in front of them both. She failed to realize as she set him the shopping cart began slowly moving away on its own. Do I need to remind you why the majority of our mission salary goes to groceries? Or better yet, who is responsible? Akamaru just whined as a group of younger ninja walked by them, chuckling at the predicament they were in. Okay, so Akamaru and I overdo it a little bit. That doesn't mean we can change him. You only have one loaf of bread in your cart. I feel like Choji cloned himself and jumped into my arms. Humph. Oh no. Said Kiba. What? She asked. Kiba's instincts told him to ditch the bags and chase after the runaway cart carrying his boy away. Kayasato laughed as the cart picked up speed, waving his arms around as the cart edged closer to a wall. Run away, baby! He yelled. He used what strength he could and threw the bags up into the air, speeding after the baby. If there was one thing he had improved on in his training, was his speed. He was easily one of the fastest ninjas in the village at this point, catching the cart within seconds, and his ever-entertained son still in the seat, waving his arms around, enjoying the ride. Phew. He said. I know your mother's scary, son, but don't do something like that again, okay? Daddy. What the? He stared at his son. He had just said his first word completely out of nowhere. Happily, he started turning around. Sakura. He just his first. He stopped in speech as he realized something. The bags. He shot back around completely. But there, walking towards him with Sakura and Akamaru, was none other than Naruto carrying the bags, but he didn't seem to be having much of an easier time with it. Geez, Sakura. What did you do? Put a whole aisle in each bag? He asked. Don't get mad at me. She defended herself. I'm not the one who goes through most of this in a week. Kiba chuckled as he scooped his son up in his arms to show Naruto. So Naruto, have you met the little guy yet? Ah. He said, placing the bags into the cart before getting in front of the baby. Kiba, is this? Yep. This is Kayasato. He proudly declared. Say hi to Naruto, buddy. He held him up a little ways out towards him. Naruto and the baby were now within inches of each other's faces as they stared down at each other. Hi. I'm Naruto Uzumaki. Kayasato laughed. Goofy. And then slapped Naruto. Shocked, he backed up with a tiny red hand print on his left cheek. Kiba just laughed. Yep, he's definitely Sakura's kid. Naruto said, holding his cheek. It didn't hurt, but damn, what kind of 1-year-old just slaps a total stranger? What's that supposed to mean? She said, crossing her arms. Don't say monstrous strength, don't say monstrous strength, don't say monstrous strength. Naruto prepped himself. Ah well. He packs quite a punch. He nervously giggled while scratching his head. Oh. She replied, completely normal. He really looks just like you, Kiba. Man, it's like looking in the past or something. Really? He looks down at Kayasato, turning him around and staring at his son's face. He did look almost identical to him. His birthmarks manifesting was the obvious sign he was his, but his hair, eyes, even his face was practically his. It was almost safe to say Kayasato looked nothing like his mother, except if anything he would probably inherit her personality. And not necessarily the good parts of it either. Daddy, he said. Kiba smiled before handing him over to Sakura. He had enjoyed his conversation with Naruto and such, but his heightened sense of smell was beginning to take the edge on him. He plugged his nose up as he handed the baby to Sakura. Here you go. Here you go? Why can't you do it? You're holding him. You remember what happened last time I tried it? With my nose? Forget about it. Besides, she was in his face at this point and not romantic by any means. Naruto knew this stance all too well, as he was sure Kiba did too. I'm a what exactly? With a cheesy grin on his face, the poor Inuzuka chuckled. A much better person for the job than I am. Humph. That better be it. She took Kayasato and walked him towards the bathroom, away from the two men and dog. Man, Naruto said. Nothing's changed, has it? Kiba shook his head. Nah. Still the same ol' Sakura. Akamaru stiffly walked to the cart, slowly but surely. Aw man. Sorry, Akamaru. Kiba said, picking the sacks up off of his back and slowly raising them up while placing them into the cart. Akamaru felt 100 pounds lighter. He quickly did a full body shake before barking in his appreciation for being able to keep his back. Why was the cart so empty and you guys were carrying all of that? Naruto asked with his eyes narrowed. It was definitely an odd sight. Kiba shrugged his shoulders. Beats me. I never go grocery shopping with her, but she insisted I go, so I know how much of a pain it is to go shopping for someone like me. So Kiba, Naruto said. How is it? Huh? How's what? He asked. You know, having a kid. Living with her, all that stuff. He shrugged his shoulders. It's tough to explain. Well, I mean, are you happy at least? Of course I'm happy. I love her more than anything in the world. But it's just something only you can understand. I think it's different for each person. Like you just know what it is when it happens, know what I mean? Yeah. I think so. He then got closer to Kiba and whispered into his ear. Okay, now what's it really like? You know what I mean, right? Kiba looked at Naruto, confused. Really like? What are you talking about? Why, you know. That stuff people do when they like each other and oh. You mean sex? Yeah. How's sex like? He loudly exclaimed. An older couple was walking past them and stopped to stare at Naruto. After an awkward moment between Naruto and the elder couple, they kept moving. Keep it down, you idiot. He said, grabbing Naruto's head in a headlock. Ow. Come on, Kiba, can't a guy ask a question? He let him go. Yeah, I guess. That's another one I don't really think I can answer. All I can say is if you don't know what you're doing, man, awkward. He glanced at Kiba. Wait, did that happen to you? What? No. No way, I'm practically an animal to begin with. Haha. He chuckled to himself. A few moments later, Sakura came walking back to them with a freshly changed baby in her arms. She kissed Kiba's cheek. Thanks for waiting. Sakura. Naruto asked. That's what you meant, Kiba? They both glanced at him confused. What are you talking about, Naruto? Sakura asked. No, Naruto. Don't say it. Kiba's thoughts yelled. His face quickly started panicking as he expected the fool to say something along the lines of yeah. It makes sense now. Sakura, when you and Kiba did it the first time, you didn't know what you were doing, right? Right? Sakura? Bam. Something like that. The fruit section was going to have to go through an extensive cleanup before the day was over. If there's one thing Sakura never lost was her inhuman strength. Sure, she was still a Chunin, but she was still a student of one of the legendary Sannin. And it showed as that single punch launched Naruto into a large stand of melons, the entire pile falling on top of him and essentially covering him. Naruto twitched as he stared at his old teammate with an old look of fear that once plagued him long ago. Wait, Sakura. I just want to know. Kiba wasn't very descriptive, and oh, so you told him? She asked Kiba, who was slowly backing away from her. And no. Why would I do something like that? He nervously laughed. I can't believe you told Naruto about our sex life. I didn't tell him about it. I just told him I couldn't describe it to him and it would be awkward if he didn't know what he was doing. So he thinks I was the one who didn't know what they were doing? I guess. I didn't say it. Why are you mad at me? He waved his hands, hoping he would not suffer a concussion and a trip to a fruit stand like his friend. Sex. Both parents immediately looked horrified as they stared at Kayasato. The baby was cackling at their responses. Sakura looked down at her son, then up at Kiba. Did he just? Sex. 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 Sakura covered her son's mouth as her face bled with the red of the blush emitting from her face. Gah. No, sweetie, I said 6. Like the number. Can you say 6? Sex. He laughed again. Ah, great, nice job, Sakura. The third word he ever says is something he won't ever know about for another 10 or 12 years. She huffed. He had a point. Come on, you. We need to find a way to get that word out of his mind. She tugged his hand, Kiba grabbing the cart as Akamaru followed behind them with his tail in between his legs. He didn't like where this was going. Gee, guys? Naruto said, trapped under a mass of melons as some of the workers came to clean up the mess. Scene change. Finally at their home, their unloading of groceries took longer than Kiba would have liked. Did he really eat this much food in a short period of time? I guess it was possible. Guy had taken the liberty to train Kiba one-on-one, teaching him and Lee at separate times and on different days. He had more days off, but the days were much longer. How's the unpacking coming, dear? Sakura asked from the living room. It was nice to give herself a break. Normally the situation would be vice versa, so she felt good giving Kiba an idea of how annoying it got unpacking all that stuff just for it to be gone in a few weeks. She picked up the remote control and began flipping through channels. Channel 1. Well, Steve, looks like another cloudy night here in the Hidden Leaf. Low humidity and chances of some light rain here in the next. Channel 2. DD, get out of my laboratory. Oh, what does this button do? No, DD, no. Channel 3. In this, the blockbuster thriller everyone has been waiting for. Is it a dream? Or is it a dream within a dream? Inception. Coming this Friday. Channel 4. I've never seen anything like it. The Green Bay Packers are the NFL champions. What an amazing game. I've never seen such a game before. Yes, you have, said the other commenter. Channel 5. Is this enough? I'm sorry, Timmy, but you need 15 tickets to live. Pulls lever to a trapdoor. HHH. Channel 6. Oh, John. Mary. John. Ma. Channel 7. Someone got some air. Oh. Snap. The two men in the television high-fived. Still hate you. I still hate you. It's such power, it's raw power. Suddenly an older man comes in and turns the TV off they were watching. Dad, what are you doing? It's Shark Week. The old man took a deep breath. Okay, here's the deal. Number 1, you will fix that fucking drywall now. Number 2, you have 1 month to find jobs or you're out on your asses. I will arrange interviews for Monday and you will go. The man on the left could not believe what his father was saying. Dad? Why are you talking to me like this? I'm your son. I'm not buying that crap anymore. The woman, his wife presumably by his side, spoke up. Today I saw my own son use a bicycle as a weapon. You yelled rape at the top of your lungs. Mom, I honestly thought I was gonna be raped for a second. He had the craziest look in his eyes and at one point he said, let's get it on. That was about the fighting. I am so not a raper. Blip. Sakura decided maybe television wasn't a great idea as she turned it off. Hey, I liked that movie. Kiba said from the back. Are you done? She asked. Even she didn't like that long. She got up from the couch in the crib by the bed. She noticed Kayasato was fast asleep. She stepped into the kitchen and gasped as she covered her mouth. The dining room that was connected to the kitchen was completely set up, candles and a decorative red tablecloth Kiba brought out when their families came for the holidays. There was a large bowl of rice in the middle, smaller plates of pork, sushi rolls, vegetables, beef and seafood. On the back side of the table furthest away from her, Kiba stood up from the table and walked over the Sakura. Kiba, did you? Yep. He said as he kissed her. You do enough around the house. It's the least I can do. He then took her hand. Hungry? She blushed lightly as she nodded. He hadn't done something this out his way since they had started dating. It was nice to know he still did the small things like this. Scene change. Akamaru made himself a small bed on top of the bed. The bed was a full king-size mattress and Kiba insisted since Akamaru was like a brother to him he stay on the bed. Sakura didn't mind, she just made sure he slept in the middle and at their feet so he wasn't in the way. The Pinkette sat in bed in large clothes. An older shirt Kiba used to wear but gave to her and a pair of short shorts. The shirt was at least a large and she fitted an extra small to a small. Kiba stepped out of the bathroom with a toothbrush in his mouth and looked around. He looked the toothbrush out. Where's Kyo? I put him in his room. He should still be sleeping. Okay, just checking. He then put the brush back in his mouth as he walked back into the bathroom and continued his evening ritual. He stepped out a few moments later and crawled into bed wearing a simple pair of shorts and a t-shirt. Both of their headbands were on their respective sides of the bed on a small table next to it. When Kiba finally settled in and laid down, Sakura leaned into him, wrapping her arms around his neck from the side. Can you believe this? Kiba asked. What's that? She asked. Where we're at, it's just made me think how much has happened. Ever since I bumped into you at the ramen shop, things have just been happening so quickly. She kissed his cheek. You didn't bump into me, Kiba. You ran into me literally, remember? He chuckled. Yeah. You're right. I remember losing quite a bit of brain cells from you shaking me. She giggled. I know what you mean though. We've come a long way, you and I. Hard to believe almost 2 years ago we were just a couple of chunin who had no idea we would end up like this. He looked over to her. Not bad, right? Nope. Not bad at all. She slowly moved her hand around his chest. Kiba, there's something I want to. Her question to be asked was interrupted by a loud snore coming from Kiba. What? He fell asleep already? She thought. She huffed and turned over, staring out into the sky from her bed. The weatherman was right. Rather cloudy, but the moon still made an appearance every couple of seconds when the clouds would break off. Looks like in the end that silly little wish we made on the Hokage's monuments paid off. She thought as her eyes finally gained their weight in and dozed off into sleep.
Thank you for your views, likes, subscriptions, and overall support of my ongoing efforts to bring great content to all of you. Check out my Patreon for more mature fanfiction. The link is in the description and like everywhere on my channel.